If I could have a call to order. We're going to start the Swampscott School Committee regular session and public hearing tonight, Wednesday, January 24th at 7 p.m. here in the high school. If I could have, we're going to start with the Pledge of Allegiance.
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
So there are a lot of new faces here tonight, and we are grateful for that. For anybody who knows this information already, forgive me. And for all of the new people, I just want to talk about the procedures. This is our bi-weekly school committee meeting where our school committee business takes place. And the business of school committee, which includes decisions and voting, always takes place in public forum as part of the democratic process. As such, this is a meeting in public, which is different from a public meeting or a town hall meeting. At the outset, there's going to be an opportunity for public comment. If you want to comment, I'm going to have you come up and sign up here up front. Public comment is an opportunity for anybody who wishes to address the school committee to speak. Please be advised that as a matter of procedure, the school committee does not generally respond to comments. It's an opportunity for you to provide the committee with your opinions for us to take it under advisement. Additionally, in addition to our usual business, tonight we're also holding two public hearings. One is on school choice, and one is on our fiscal year 19 proposed budget. These hearings are part of our broader meeting, and during each hearing, there is going to be time for the public to ask questions about that are specific to the topic. We anticipate a lot of questions, and so if you'd like to speak, please raise your hand and wait to be recognized. And when you are, if you could come forward to the microphone and state your name, your precinct, and any other way that you wish to be identified, like a parent at a particular school. This is particularly important. We do have a lot of people who watch us on TV, and so making sure that you are at a microphone is very important, not only for us to hear you, for the audience to hear you, but also for the people at home. So I want to thank everybody in advance for helping us make this run smoothly. Regarding the budget specifically, I want to note that this is our first reading. We've had a lot of questions about where in the process we are, and Evan Katz is going to provide some more information there. It's not final. We are not going to be final, and it won't be finalized until town meeting approves it in May. So your comments here tonight will all be taken into consideration. Additionally, for those of you who are not in attendance and who might be watching us from home, there is still time for you to contact the committee. And after this, there'll be continued conversations between the selectmen, the finance committee, and the school committee. And like this meeting, they are all public. So with that, let's get down to business. And if anybody would like to sign up for public comment, this is a great time to do that. And if not, then we will get underway. Okay, first up we have Mr. Steve Benevento. Is he here? Next up we have Jeanne Pats. Pats, thanks. If you'd like to speak now and make a comment, that's great. As I mentioned, this is sort of more of a one-way comment and not time for questions. So it's however you'd like to. Okay.
So as I mentioned, this is to the topic of the FY19 budget.
Let's just make sure that we can get you on.
Thank you. My name is Jeanne Pats. I attended the January 10th school committee meeting and Monday night's parent information session. From what I learned at each of these meetings, it seems there is an urgent need to reassign students because of the Massachusetts School Building Authorities, because the Massachusetts School Building Authority toured our schools this fall and witnessed illegal special education instruction taking place in our schools' hallways. Whether this practice has been going on for many years or is new to this school year, clearly it's unacceptable. This leads me to believe that this proposal is not about the budget. This is not about the conditions of our school buildings. This is about the administration allowing this inappropriate instruction to take place. There's no acknowledgement on the parts of Mrs. Angelakis or the school committee that you allowed this to happen. You're passing the buck and expecting our children and teachers to just accept the consequences of your failure to address a major issue. The administration was either not aware of the problem or chose to ignore it because this year's school assignments for kindergartners were only made in mid-August of 2017. We could have easily begun to tackle the overcrowding issue in this year's school assignments, but for some reason opted not to do so. Our children and teachers should not have to suffer the consequences of our leadership's errors and oversights, especially kindergartners. I do not understand why these children aren't being granted the same favor as our rising fourth graders. Why are you considering kindergartners any less vulnerable to a second year at a new school than fourth graders? One would think that kindergartners would be more vulnerable to adjustment issues because they are younger and entirely new to school. Finally, I ask, why can't this administration acknowledge that you made some mistakes and kindly ask us to work with you to come up with a solution? Why isn't true collaboration and innovation being pursued? Thank you.
Thank you. Next up, we have Meg ONeill.
Hi, good evening. My name is Meg ONeill. I am a parent and a resident of Swampscott. I'm here today to start with a commendation. The position of superintendent is an esteemed one, and our schools are superb. This leadership has been outstanding. My son is thriving and happy. At the same time, I also appreciate the emphasis on equity and collaboration. When it comes to working together, I hope we can do so. There's a current petition. Nearly 500 folks have given signatures toward this effect. I actually view this as a very positive thing. It shows how much our families care about the school. I also appreciate the collaboration with parents in forming a task force. However, I'm greatly disappointed to hear that the task force had not been informed of any of the line items or the initiatives that were on the table. I really implore the school committee, moving forward, to keep this as much of an open, inclusive process as possible. I believe we all want the best resources, facilities, and services for our students. And I hope we can work together in an informed, transparent process moving forward. Thank you.
Next up, we have Emily Walger.
This may be sort of to the same point, so I'll try to keep it brief. My My name is Emily Walger. For procedural purposes, I believe that I read in one of the town bylaws that if I'm to speak at a meeting like this, I do need to acknowledge that I'm an attorney, which I am, but I practice veterans law, nothing to do with education. However, I also want to emphasize that I simply speak as a concerned parent of 3 young children in the elementary, middle school, and preschool system, and simply as a concerned Swampscott citizen. I would also like to thank the school committee, the Board of Selectmen, for their countless hours of volunteer service. It's really a lot that you do for this town, and thank you for that. I'd also like to thank the superintendent for putting together the FY19 budget proposal that's all being discussed right now. That's a lot of work, and to bring it down to a fiscally responsible number, I'm sure, is also a huge task. So thank you for being thoughtful about that. With regard to the proposed cut of 4 K-3 teachers and 1 high school English teacher, I would like to reiterate my thoughts of the other night at the parent information meeting. Again, thank you for that meeting. That was helpful to a lot of us, although it was on a bit short notice. I think there's a general feeling that this proposal came out of the blue. And perhaps that's not the case. Perhaps we're just ill-informed, but it does seem quite rushed. And that we need to collaborate to find better options for our schools. I think to talk about this issue of collaboration, there are 2 questions. How can we collaborate effectively? And why should we? Why not just work as a school committee, the superintendent, pass the budget, and move on? It is a valid question. How? These are a few of the ideas I've heard of many, I am sure, because there are a lot of really involved caring parents here, townspeople, teachers, and I'd like to acknowledge also, I think it's really great that everyone's here. One that I've heard frequently is to take a more gradual approach to the exact idea that the superintendent is talking about of adjusting space, teaching needs of particular students. For example, reduce a kindergarten class if need be from Stanley next year. These children haven't entered the kindergarten system yet, and so would be less affected than current kindergartners, for example. Free up a classroom. Get learning out of the halls. It can't be there. We all know that. Let's fix it, and let's fix it immediately. If that works, do the same the following year and in subsequent years. That would allow for students needing substantially separate classroom space to be well served in our district's elementary schools, and as they get older, adjust as needed. I think another proposal that was an interesting question the other night that I think was left a bit hanging, I'm sure not on purpose, but that has been a repetitive question, is what were some of the alternatives discussed to cutting teachers and moving students? Is it possible to release that information more publicly? I think that question was raised by Jeanne Landon. I think she asked a thoughtful question there. Perhaps release even these options in survey form to the parents out of the superintendent's office. I think there's something, Survey Monkey or something like that. I mean, there's some ways that we could really probably get some interesting opinions as to what could work or not. Or maybe just ask for ideas, as seems to be done in increasing numbers of school districts nationwide. I read an article the other night after the parent information meeting about an interesting district in the Midwest. They were really cash-strapped. One particular district used crowdsourcing. They really wanted to get everyone talking about how to save money and how to save money for a new school. And it was an interesting concept. I think the superintendent was writing in, so were the townspeople, so were the seniors, so were the kids. It was great, as long as it was respectful. I think one other school that had a little more money managed to send out postcards. That might cost a little too much, but, it's an option. I think generally the idea of collaboration and letting us choose how to save money and how to be fiscally responsible is really important, helping people to feel like they are involved in that decision. It is our tax money, and it's important that we all feel involved. I think following the passage of budget FY19, it will have to happen. I think continuing to survey parents and town citizens going forward about their interests and preferences with regard to improving our schools and hopefully building a new school is really important. I mean, I think keeping the momentum going is huge. What would make you vote for a new school? What do we need in our new school? How can we afford it? And on and on. So those are the hows, just a couple of examples, and I'm sure many of you up there have many, many more better ideas. So this is simply an example. I think we move on to why should we collaborate and take a perhaps, some people have called it a more transparent approach. Maybe I would call it an involved approach, because some of us just haven't been showing up, so that's our fault too. So I would say why should we collaborate? And why should we work so hard at doing that? For one, I believe that in this town, we really do eventually need a new school building. For that to happen, we must demonstrate collaboration with each other, with the town, and also with the state. The state, I believe, needs to see that we as a community can agree on a new school. They need to see that of passing that vote is plausible, or there's a real risk that they won't want to work with us. How do we go about these budget decisions now allows us to all learn to work respectfully together, but it also does something bigger. I think it allows us to document for the state over the course of, say, as many years as it takes to get to the new school, maybe 5, 4, 3, however quickly we can get there. It allows us to document for the state that a successful vote for a new school in Swampscott is plausible. Save the surveys we send out. Save the emails. Save the minutes of the town meetings and send all of that to the state and say, you know what, we failed a few years ago, but we learned from it. We're not going to do it again. You want to work with us. We're a great town with great citizens and great committee members and a great superintendent, and we can do this. But we also aren't going to just say it. We're going to show it to you. I think also, even if we manage to get to a new school, we eventually want to make sure that we have donors that want to work with us for things like enrichment programs. I think it's a little bit like picking your charities. I don't know if anybody else does this, but if you're considering donating a significant amount of money, I think it's quite common to go online and look at the rating of the charity. How much of that money is going to the purpose that you're talking about? You know, is it really going to build that well out in the desert, or is it going to pay for, you know, something that you might not exactly want? I do think that those that are able to afford to help out our schools really, really do want to see us working together. And they want to see a transparent accounting of how we're doing that. If we don't do these things, I worry that we seriously risk another failed vote and lack of funding. Somebody has spoken earlier about the almost 500 people that have signed a petition in the last 2 days because they are so upset over the proposed teacher cuts and reassignment of students. These are voting Swampscott citizens. We can't afford to lose their votes, or the votes of the people they might talk to. I worry about driving a wedge between the school system and much-needed votes for a new school. I believe that the benefits of spending the $200,000 approximately necessary to keep these teachers and avoid total reassignment. Perhaps it's a little bit less if we reduce a kindergarten class, but somewhere in that vicinity. I think the benefit of spending that money next year far outweighs the risks of another failed attempt at getting closer to a new vote.
I don't wanna.
Oh, I'm sorry, of course. Also, if we need to, if we really, really can't spend that money, is it possible, and I know this is a question, to maybe go with supply lists, you know, have everyone buy a ream of paper? It's possible. It might get us a little closer. I also lastly would simply say that I think working collaboratively is the right thing to do because most importantly, our kids are watching. We ask them daily at home and in school to adopt a growth mindset, to be honest and transparent with us, and to work effectively and respectfully with each other. It's a big issue in schools these days. How can we ask this of them if we're not doing it ourselves in our community? Let's use the massive available community talent, interest, and caring available in this room and in this town, and be the model example that these kids need. Let's collaborate, share information, work respectfully together, and teach these kids how to pass a fiscally responsible budget that is truly in their best interest. Thank you very much.
Thank you. That was our last person. I want to go back and see if Mr. Steve Benevento is here and if he'd like to speak before we move on. Okay? And was there anybody else who'd like to make it? I'm not sure if you were here at the beginning. There's also opportunity to speak during the budget hearing itself, and that will be more interactive. There you can ask questions. Okay. Anybody? Okay. So with that, we'll move on. Thank you. Thanks. Okay, so does anybody have any community announcements? Do you want to start, Ted?
I'd just like to thank everybody for showing up. If it seems like I am squinting at you, please don't read into it. I've lost my glasses and cannot see really much. I do want to highlight the collaboration comments. I do think as a board we are collaborating, and from the budget process you can see a productive piece of work. When I first came on the committee, it is night and day, so thank you for your time, and hopefully you can attend future school committee meetings.
Here, should I speak into this? Yeah. I don't really have much to say. Midterms are over. We're sort of trying to integrate the Metco community a little more into the high school, and we have a few sort of ideas and like more representation in the student body or like the student council. So we're sort of working on that. And the vaping stuff, it's still sort of a big issue, especially between the students and the teachers. But it definitely seems like, there's been a lot of pushback with like sort of the bathroom monitoring, and like from a personal perspective, like it is a lot to sort of deal with, and you sort of feel like you're restricted. But I also think that vaping is going down, so I think it's been mixed, but I think it's been a positive change in the high school overall. So yeah.
Definitely keep us posted on the Metco.
Yep.
Yeah, it's not great. I want to echo Ted's appreciation for all the people here. It's really important, and it's really nice to see people at our meetings, because sometimes we sit in the other room and there's no one or one or two people, and you forget that so many people are invested, and hopefully you're listening at home if you're not here, but it's just nice to see everyone in public, and I know it's going to be great because we're going to have some interactions, which we don't always get to do. So thank you for coming out and participating.
I'll echo that, and I'll thank everybody for coming as well. It's a different kind of meeting when we have the public hearings, so I guess everybody wants to get to the meat, so I will let you move on.
I don't have anything.
Okay. With that, we'll move into the superintendent's report.
So I have one item on my superintendent's report tonight, and that is from the College Board and the AP District Honor Roll that we've made again. We've made this as a district annually, and the letter I received says, "Congratulations. The College Board is pleased to share the exciting news that your district has earned a position on the 8th Annual AP District Honor Roll. The Annual AP District Honor Roll recognizes districts for increasing access to advanced placement coursework while maintaining or increasing the percentage of students earning scores of 3 or higher on AP exams. Honor Roll districts defy the expectation that expanding access automatically results in a decline in the percentage of exams earning scores of 3 or better. Reaching these goals indicates that your district is successfully identifying motivated, academically prepared students who are likely to benefit from rigorous AP coursework. I'm proud to say we've received this award annually, and we've received it once again this year."
Okay, with that, we're going to move into the public hearing on school choice. I will entertain a motion to enter into public hearing.
Second?
No, I need a motion.
I'll make that motion.
I'll second. Okay. All in favor? All right, we are in public hearing as it relates to school choice. Is there anybody in the audience who would like to make comment on this particular subject? Okay. Are you, is there any announcement to make that is different than our years past?
I make a recommendation. My
Okay.
recommendation is that our district does not accept, school choice, and that we decline including school choice in our district plans.
Okay. And this has been true for 30-plus years. Okay. If there are any questions or comments, thoughts?
I would just, maybe for people listening, just inform everyone that this is something that we're required to take up every year. And so it's an annual thing that we decide whether or not to participate. And in the past, we have always declined.
And every district does the same thing annually.
Right, okay. So with that, I'm going to, entertain a motion to close the public hearing.
I'll make the motion.
Second?
Okay, all in favor? And unless there's anything further, we're gonna, I'll take a motion to vote.
I'll make the motion.
Okay, do I have a second? All in favor? A motion to vote not to participate in school choice for the 2018-2019 school year. All in favor? The motion passes. Okay. And now, for the moment everybody is here for, is our public hearing on our budget. So, I will could I have a motion to open this public hearing?
I'll make the motion.
And could I have a second?
Second.
All in favor to enter into public hearing? Okay. And why don't I turn this over to you, Superintendent Angelakis?
Thank you.
For people who are here, I know that, I believe, Superintendent, that you tweeted out links to the presentation. Is that true? Or
Not the presentation, to the budget.
but to the budget itself, okay. That budget exists, it will be shown here tonight, but it also exists on the school website under the business office, correct? That the budget's under the business office? Okay, so for anybody who'd like to dig into it beyond what we see here tonight, you'll find it there.
There are also available copies in my office at the located at the middle school. You can come in and get a copy. They're right on the counter, available for all of you. So the evening the other night, the presentation to both parents and students, teachers in the afternoon, the budget proposals got clouded in the overall budget picture. And I think, the biggest question, the takeaway I had on Monday evening was, what is driving this? Is it a new school? Is it the space issue? Is it programming? Is it enrollment? So I hope tonight I've put together something that will clarify it for you. Whether you use programming or enrollment, they're all pieces to this puzzle, but I want to take you through a little more information that I hope will clarify things. We have many, many strengths as a school district. Over the last several years, we have rebuilt our band programs at all levels. We've reinstated our librarians, media specialists. We've made significant progress with our technology infrastructure needs. We've provided teachers with their own electronic devices. We've invested in technology needs for our students, not just for the unfunded mandate of state testing, but also for daily use in their classrooms. We've provided robust and meaningful professional development opportunities for our educators. We're supporting our students in the area of mental health. Our test scores are consistently above the state level, and our kids are doing really well. However, there are two very important areas where we need to show improvement: infrastructure and long-range planning. I've reached a point in my tenure that I'm very fortunate to have both a talented and stable executive team and leadership team.
The school department is working well with the leadership at Town Hall, and we have a trusting relationship with the Finance Committee. This budget season has been very different from all other budget seasons. Our budget discussions and development began much earlier than years past, and we've had many more frequent meetings between the school department and general government regarding the budget. Special town meeting in October set the stage for town finances and being invited back into the Statement of Interest program. It brought us to a place as a school department when we needed to stop talking and start taking action on long-range planning. We're at a place of hitting the reset button, getting back to the norm, or course correcting. I sincerely appreciate the questions and comments that both teachers and parents shared at the informational meetings on Monday afternoon and evening. I've taken time to reflect on your questions and do hope to provide you with more clarification. First, the decision to reduce 4 teachers at the elementary level, though it shows in the budget and feels like a budget decision, is in reality an enrollment decision. Our current enrollment, our enrollment over the past many years, and our projected enrollment warrants only 7 sections at each grade level, not 8. The enrollment projections over the last several years have been spot on. These are not documents created internally. They're reports provided by a vendor who is contracted by our district and our countless districts to produce reasonably accurate numbers. Class sizes of 16 and 17 students were not created by design in this school district. They happened due to enrollment. I'd like to share some history of our elementary class sizes. In 2007, we had elementary class sizes of 23, 24, and 25 students. In 2010, across the board, we consistently had class sizes of 20, 22, 23, and then it was even a 4th grade class of 26 students. And I can tell you in those days, there wasn't the ancillary support that we're putting into classrooms today. That means it was 1 teacher and potentially a support staff for part of the day. In 2012, we had many classes at the elementary level at 21, 22, 23, and 24. And then in 2016, many of the classes across the district, not all of them, were at 22 and 23 students. Do we recognize additional benefits as a result of this in creating this efficiency? Yes, we do. The benefits are that we begin to address the issue of equity in our small 3-square-mile community. And we begin to address our learning environment issues. I'd like to take a moment to share with you the learning environment issues at Clark and Stanley. Some people are unaware of them. This is at Stanley. It is at the top of a stairwell. There is a classroom directly behind these blue chairs. There is a classroom. There is a classroom here. There is a classroom here. There is a hallway here. I visit schools as often as I can, and I can tell you this learning space is pretty neat this day. I don't think I've ever seen it with this few chairs. But right here is a stairwell. And in my mind, walking this way and that way, going to the bathroom, kids out of these classrooms, not okay. This is also at Stanley. There is a hallway coming here, a hallway going there, a stairwell going up there, and this is an actual learning space for a teacher with one-to-one or an office space. This too is at Stanley School. I can tell you there's a stairwell right here. There's a hallway coming this way with multiple classrooms on either side. There's a classroom here and another hallway where kids in these classrooms would have to come down and walk down the stairs. This is the top 2nd floor space of the new lift at Clark School. Was it designed, the lift is right over here somewhere, was it designed to be a teaching space? Certainly not, but it's become a teaching or learning space. Here is a picture of the 2nd floor hallway at Clark School. We have a teacher workspace there, and I have another view of looking in the other direction where there are actual learning spaces. This is an OT, occupational therapy, physical therapy space, and let me go back, I'm not a good driver. And right here is like the entrance to the lift. So not only do you have a learning space inside the lift on the second floor, the lift space, you have an OT and PT space that's utilized up there as well. This is a classroom at Clark School that has a half wall. There's also another classroom at Clark that has this setup. There are students learning on this side of the wall. There are students learning on the other side of the wall. The types of students that are in these classrooms need much more privacy and focus area than this. And this is another space at Stanley, classroom here, boys and girls room here, classroom down here, and that is a learning space with an easel as well. So I show those to you as examples because the other night somebody had said, how much learning is occurring in the hallways? And I just thought for those that aren't familiar with Clark and Stanley, it would be a great opportunity to see what's going on there. Someone asked me Monday evening, have we thought about portables? It's a good question, but portables are a great solution when you have overcrowding. We don't have overcrowding in our schools, we have enrollment issues. After further analysis of this programming change, we started to estimate that there'd be approximately 45 students from Stanley who will have to move from Stanley in current grades K1 and 2, and approximately 20 students who will move from Hadley to Clark. Best practice in any organization involves continuous reflection and questioning. How are we doing things? Why are we doing them that way? How can we do them better? Are we doing things the same way we've always done because it's convenient, because it's comfortable? Successful districts do this all the time, and something as a district that we will have to continue to do each year moving forward. I'd now like to introduce Mr. Katz with the budget presentation.
Thank you, Superintendent Angelakis. Vice Principal Dennis Kohut is passing around a sheet that we'll refer to in this presentation. So while he passes that around, we're not going to get to that till a little ways along. I will start the presentation and it'll get to you in time. So the agenda tonight, what we're going to do is cover the budget in a number of levels, and we'll eventually work our way to the budget document that some of you might have looked at online. It's about 15 pages long, but this will give you an opportunity to acquaint you with the issues and some of the questions that you have about the budget, try to explain the impact of what is being proposed by the school committee. So we're going to go over the timeline, a little bit about how much the town has supported the school department in the budget, what the goals of the budget are, some of the highlights. We'll take a little bit of time to discuss some detail on some of the priority areas. We'll look at the budget document itself, an overview, and we will be able to answer any questions that you have about the detail. We won't spend a lot of time on the 15-page document, but you're certainly welcome to ask any questions about it now and after tonight as well. And then we'll wrap up. So the timeline is tonight is the budget hearing. The vote on this budget is scheduled for 3 weeks, February 14th. The school committee is meeting with the Selectmen and Finance Committee on February 28th. And as many of you know, planning for next September is underway now and really starts heating up in March, April, and May. Town meeting, as the chairwoman mentioned, is on May 21st. And then during the summer, of course, we continue to plan. This chart shows the history of town budget support, which is one of the topics that there's been a lot of conversation about. And you can see in the top half the various shades of tan and brown. The increases ranged from a little less than 1% in fiscal 14 and as high as a little over 3% just before that. What's happened over the last few years is the level of support has really increased to support the goals of the superintendent and the school committee and helped us accomplish all the things you heard about earlier and that you see going on in our schools. Where we are is that the town cannot continue to sustain the 4% increases that have been going on, and the school committee has been advised of that. So we're entering a new phase in terms of the support for the school budget. The goals are many here, but we've tried to boil them down. The target is 2.5% increase in town revenue based on the guidelines that we've received from Town Hall. We're going to sustain the strong and effective programs that are in place. We're going to keep class sizes in a desirable range. We're going to reduce the use of substandard teaching space, and we're reprioritizing. We're going to move funds to the areas of greatest need, and we have to reduce funding in areas of lowest priority. In terms of the numbers, the budget that's being presented to you tonight has an increase in town funds of about $760,000, 2.7%. Our grant and revolving fund revenue is down a little bit over $100,000, about 4.8%, and when you put the two together, the increase is about $653,000, 2.1%. We'll look at these numbers a little more closely towards the end of this presentation, but this is the overview. The page that was handed out, this is the top half, and it's a revised version of one that you might have seen a couple of weeks ago. And what I've tried to do here is the bottom half, at the very bottom shows the $760,000 in blue. We'll get to there in a second. So what's changed since the meeting a couple of weeks ago is in orange. We've had to, in reviewing before presentation tonight, we've added overtime for the maintenance crew. We had an increase for gas and electricity a couple of weeks ago based on the projected pricing and consumption. We don't need to budget that next year. We did add $5,000 for security expenses based on trends. And on the left there, the blue bubble, there was a middle school position that was listed previously that has been taken out. And then the proposal on classroom teachers previously had involved K through 4 for 5 positions, with 2 being maintained. Now the affected grades are K through 3, with maintaining 1 teacher for targeted support of those 7 classrooms at each grade. The bottom half on other resources, there was 2 positions that initially thought were vacant, and upon further review there was 1. We consolidated the funding of turnover savings, which is reflected from a couple of retirements and a teacher returning, where there's funds that have to be added back into the budget, so that amount changed to $57,000. We did consider billing the town of Nahant for benefits cost of staff that we hire to support its students, but it turns out that the staff that are doing that do not have benefits, so we had to take that off the table. At the bottom, there's the $760,000. And to point out in red on the right, given the kinds of changes that we've had to make and the limited amount of funding that we have, we, at this point, cannot include any increase in special ed transportation and tuition. Now, right now, based on the projections of the Student Services Director, Martha Raymond, the increases projected as of today are fairly small, but we would like to work with the town to figure out the solution for how to handle special education increases. So we just want to identify that given the amount of money that we have to work with, this is something that we have to put off to the side and talk some more about. Also under review, to possibly address that, the possibility of creating a special ed stabilization fund, which is now allowed under state law. We have collective bargaining on the horizon. Our contract with the teachers is settled for next year, but we have 3 of our smaller bargaining units that have negotiations to take place on. The capital budget, which includes technology, is pending, and it's possible, it usually happens, there are additional retirements that take place during the second half of the year that we don't know about, and if those take place, we will consider those in the overall mix of where we go. So again, just to review this, we've got a budget that supports growth in special education and the English language learner program. We're adding to insufficient budgets. We're looking at fewer positions. There's a change in funding source that doesn't affect the bottom line, involving a position funded by the town's cable TV fund. We're applying savings, money that we have in the budget this year that's not needed next year. We're looking at revenue projections, coming a little closer to the projected actuals than we are this year. We're looking at fee increases. We're making provisions for anticipated salary costs and factoring in reduced revenue. So if you see those numbers there for those categories, those all tie back to that sheet, and we come with the same bottom line of a $760,000 increase. Now let's look at some of the higher priority items that are driving some parts of the budget. You've heard us talk about special education and English language learner programs. What we have here is a chart that shows over 6 years at the bottom the number of English language learner students, the blue in the middle, special education, and the green at the top is the combined total. And these are the students that we're serving today. The mix of our students is changing. And if you look over as a trend of percentage of enrollment, our enrollment has been going down slightly. These pool of students are increasing, and it's creating more demands on the operating budget, and we need to support these programs as well. So in fiscal 13, these students made up about 15% of our total enrollment. This year, it's about 19%. You probably noticed in the sheet that we're allocating another $100,000 for the substitute budget. And this is a combination of teachers who are out for a day and need a daily sub, and also for teachers who are taking long-term absences. And if you look on the left side, the orange bar is the budget. So where the green balloon is, if you can see for fiscal 15 and 16, we budgeted between $350,000 to $380,000 for substitutes, and the expenditures were below $300,000. And based on that trend, in fiscal 17, we reduced the budget. And of course, trends reversed, and we spent over $400,000 on subs last year. And this year, the current rate has, as I said, about $400,000. So we need to increase the budget in that area. And the school committee has expressed some concern. We're working at managing this, but a lot of it is due to the profile of our staff, which is changing. If we have long-term absences, we have to fill them with qualified teachers, and we pay the long-term substitutes on a teacher salary scale. So a lot of situations we're paying to have two people in one position, the absent staff person and the substitute. And salaries, as you know, is the major portion of the budget. If you add up all the salaries in the budget, it's about 80%, almost 25 million, and expenses about 6. So people and education, it's a salary-driven enterprise, and so all of our decisions ultimately boils down to people. And looking ahead in terms of what we know about salaries for next year, our teachers' contract, if you look at the bottom, we've got our different employee groups. And the teachers, which is our largest employee group, that contract has been settled. That's about 74% of our total salaries. Our other groups, custodians, administrative assistants, miscellaneous, staff, tutors, ESPs, our education support professionals, and leadership team, all of the salaries for those groups have yet to be determined. And as I mentioned earlier, there are 3 contracts to be negotiated: custodians, administrative assistants, and ESPs. As I mentioned earlier, also we're applying some savings, funds that are in the current budget that we don't need to use next year. We had an early retirement program last spring, and we paid for several positions, totaling $45,000, the incentive. We had a couple of teachers who worked for part of the year. We won't need those funds again next year. We had an unfilled position, and as I mentioned earlier, we have some senior staff leaving, and we expect to hire their replacements at a lower rate. So there's some savings there, a little bit less factoring back added salary for a teacher returning from leave. On the revenue increases, we're talking about $100,000. We can use a projection of revenue on circuit breaker, the state aid program for high-cost special education. We can project a revenue amount of $65,000 higher, $65,000 greater, a little bit closer to the projected amount. We were a little conservative this year, not knowing the funding of that program. And then preschool tuition, we can budget a little tighter, so there's $100,000 there. And the school committee is also going to be taking under consideration the possibility of increasing lunch prices by 25 cents. That would bring in $15,000. What that has done over the last few years, we didn't increase prices this year, but we did the prior 2. We have been able to use funds in our revolving account for food service to pay for new equipment in the kitchens, something we hadn't been able to do previously. We're also looking at possibly increasing the driver's ed fee, which even with an increase would still be cheaper than most private firms. We're looking at building rental fees. If we increase those each by 15%, we'd bring in about $10,000. And then the school committee is also looking at athletic user fees. There was a special meeting last week on this topic. We had a presentation by the athletic director and looked at fees from a number of different angles. We're also looking at student activity fees. Of course, the big topic is class size. Just to give a little bit of perspective, this shows along the left classroom number, and at the bottom, the number of students. This is based on the early January enrollment. And what we wanted to share here is that of the 40 classrooms that we have, grade kindergarten through 4, 11 have between 21 and 23 students. And the purpose behind this chart is to just emphasize that we have experience in providing the same quality education in those classes as we are in the others. And just wanted to make you aware that we do have a number of classes in that in that range, which is the goal for next year. So crunching the numbers, projected for next year, the average class size, these are rounded, we have the detail on the next page, and we are going to post this online tomorrow, by the way. The average kindergarten class would go from 20 to 22 students, the average first grade from 18 to 23, grade 2 from 20 to 21, and grade 3 from 18 to 23. And this is what it would look like. You can see on the left the current class size, and on the right the projected. And we're using the kindergarten enrollment. I think Mrs. Raymond can tell you it's a little hard to project exactly how many kindergarten students we're going to have. Right now we have 159, which is one of the larger groups we've had in the last 6 to 8 years. I think the high end of projections would put us at 155, which would put us at that 22 range. It may well be lower, but we just wanted to use a higher end projection at this point. And this is the front page of the budget document itself, which was posted online, and I can certainly answer questions if there were things that you saw or had questions about. But just to orient you to some of the numbers and some of the things we've talked about earlier, the red circles with the arrows, the 760 up at the top. Where's this? Oops. Which one is the? Anyway, 760, and there's the minus 106 in the lower right-hand corner. There's that net 653 from, if you go way back, the middle button, thank you very much. Too many slides. There it is. That 760 is the town increase from this number over there, that number there. This is the grant and revolving fund section down the bottom. There's the minus 106. Take that number there, subtract that, and there's the 653 from earlier on. The changes that we talked about in some of the revenue areas, this is the state circuit breaker program. We get significant funding for our high-cost special education students over here. We had a number of 530,000 for a revenue projection, going up to 595. The preschool, we're going from about 240 to 289. Those are increases. Extended day, the 150,000 of support we're getting right now of extended day, they contribute to electricity and heat in our buildings. That's really at the high end. I don't think we're going to be able to repeat that next year. That's down from 150 to 100. In cable TV, this is a change in funding source. It's not a budget impact issue, but it's just the way the town is sending its cable TV revenue to the school department. And it's being handled in an indirect fashion. So that's the cover sheet. This is an example of one of the pages to orient you to the different colored cells that we have. We've tried to add a little more explanation to some of the line items. Up here are the three different types of funding that we have. We talked about town revenue. This is the greatest source of revenue. Revolving funds, and I'll go back actually for a second. The revolving funds, we have building rental here, extended day, and the preschool. Then grants, and the major grants that support our programs are Title I, which is a math support program, and special education right here, and then the METCO program, 371,000. So then you'd have a total, and the increase is for all sources. So the budget itself way over here on the left side, which doesn't show, is last year. So if you compared the total column here to the total column over there, this would be the increase. And what we've done this year to try to add a little more depth to the budget, and the purple lines is just talk a little bit more about, in the space that's allocated, what's covered. So for example here, specialists at Clark School, the music, art, phys ed, and the STEM teachers, science, technology, engineering, and math. The orange cells, the places where there were substantial changes, we put in orange to try to delineate the two and draw attention to those in case people were trying to find where all the big changes were. Here's, for example, this is a substitute section. So we added $10,000 to the substitute line here at Clark. And here's a line where library media, where a teacher is leaving. So there's a reduction in the projected salary, and that shows turnover savings. So for any of you who have wanted to look at the budget online or have a copy and you have questions, you can certainly ask them tonight. I'm very welcome to answer questions by email. If they're very complicated or detailed, I might have to consult the superintendent or the school committee, but if you have a basic factual question, you can email me through the school website, and I'll be happy to get back to you. So that wraps up this portion of the presentation, and from here we can have comments and questions. I know the school committee is probably going to want to spend some time discussing after they hear what everyone has to say, and then the next big step after tonight is a vote on February 14th. Okay.
Thank you for that, Evan. Mr. Katz. Before we move into the questions and comments, somebody mentioned earlier the petition that's online. The school committee and the superintendent, and I believe also the selectmen, have all gotten updates from change.org. Unfortunately, those updates are very limited. And so, for example, I would get an email that says, there was one today where it highlighted that 2 people from Alabama and somebody from Maine signed it, to sort of emphasize the breadth of people who are involved. If anybody knows who owns that, they can access who has signed it. And I think I speak for everybody on the committee. If they could forward that to us, while I know I'm interested in everybody who has signed it, I'm particularly interested in who our constituents are who've signed it, because we want to make sure that we follow up with everybody and that their questions are answered and concerns are heard. So if somebody could pass along to whomever it is that owns that, that we would really, we could benefit from that information, that would be really helpful. So I want to set the stage as a little bit of a follow-up to the meeting that we had with our teachers and staff last week, as well.
This week.
Oh, this week. Feels like it was a year ago. As well as with our parents on Monday night. And one of the things that struck me is that I've heard a lot of comments over the last 2 weeks regarding the budget proposal, and that there has been a fair amount of frustration with the idea that our numbers contradict with the special town meeting presentation that took place. And the question has come up both in meetings as well as through phone calls and emails, like, why, what's happening here? You know, the town meeting said we're so flush with cash, you know, how is this happening? And I heard something very different at that meeting. And for me, and I think for a number of us here, that was a watershed moment, because I heard our town officials talking about how our financials are improving, about how our debt rating is on the rise, which means that borrowing costs us less money, about how debt obligations are going down. However, what I heard was there's still a lot that needs to be that we need to catch up on. And I know from our position here that primary among them is a new school building. But what I heard Selectman Spelio say was about budgeting carefully, and how if we budget carefully and we create long-term plans as opposed to just solving a quick need, that Swampscott can not only slow our residential tax burden, which is appealing obviously for everybody here who owns a home, but it's going to allow us to still be able to afford the things that we need and want to do. And we really need a new building. So with that in mind, the school committee set out to really take a look at the budget and slow our budget growth. Maybe we could pull that slide up that shows the last 10 years or so to more sustainable levels. We have giant infrastructure needs coming up in the next few years, and we're looking at tens of millions of dollars realistically, and we've got to plan accordingly. And we can't use free cash to do that. We have to rely on our operational budgets that are repeatable and reliant on predictable revenue. And I think importantly, like you, we know how critical the education of our children is. You know, we know that a strong district increases our home values, but more importantly, that it's just the right thing to do for our kids, which is why we're here on the school committee. This is the first time in decades that every member of our school committee and every selectman has a child in our schools. And so our vantage point coming to this first is as parents, community members, taxpayers, homeowners. And I think also uniquely, we have representation from all of the elementary schools. Some with kids still in elementary, but certainly kids who've gone through all the three that are currently operating. Not to say that there's going to change anything there. So I put that in place because I'm very keen to a lot of the feedback that we have been hearing, and want to put it out there that we're all in this together, to what Ms. Walger was saying, that we all have really the same end game. So with that, I think I would like to open it up to questions and comments. Ms. Pappalardo. So as I said before, if I call your name, please come up to this particular, do we have one on this side?
He's going to move it up.
Okay, to one or the other of them. Just state who you are, what precinct you're from, anything else that you might want us to know about you, and speak clearly so everybody at home can hear you as well. Doesn't sound like it.
Hello, okay. Okay, I'm Elizabeth Pappalardo. I've been a town meeting member for the past 3 years, hopefully be reelected, but I'm not sure. But I've learned a lot since I started as far as how the town works. So I've also been a parent at Stanley for years, and I'm a middle school parent. First, I have a lot of questions, and thank you, because I think tonight answered a lot of questions. First, the Finance Committee, they're actually right next to me, a lot of them, but I don't know if they're allowed to speak. What was the recommendation that for us for the increase 2.3? Is that?
We have not gotten a recommendation yet from the town. This is we simply have put together a budget.
Evan, didn't you mention?
We were at 2.5%, but right now it's not quite at 2.5. It's a little higher. It's about 2.7 where we're at right now. So we were targeting 2.5. I think is correct.
We're targeting 2.5%, but I want to be clear that this is not because the town came to us or FinCom has not come to us and said this is the number. However, having done this now for 5 or 6 years, I can tell you that in the last few years, when we've been looking at numbers like 4.3, 4.2, 4.4, the very clear answer is you guys got to get a hold of this because we cannot continue to fund it.
Yeah. Okay, so understood, and I'd just like to acknowledge that it's not just the school committee that needs to work under a budget and just make these decisions, because there are other committees involved, the Board of Selectmen and the Finance Committee is what I've learned. And, so it's important to be aware of what all of the committees recommend and what they're supporting, and I don't want to go backwards, but, the Finance Committee supported $850,000 towards a trail. So, we need to look at these things when we ask questions and not just ask the school committee. And it wasn't the entire finance committee, and I'm not putting them on the spot, but 5 of them, were in favor, as was this school committee. So we can talk about priorities with our money. But my question is, we didn't talk about the special ed. I know you mentioned it. The special ed teacher that's being eliminated in the high school was because of smaller class sizes, or?
How many kids we would have, sorry. I'm Martha Raymond, Director of Student Services. So we constantly do this in special education. The amount of staff we have or program we need is based on student need. So if the student need changes, then we automatically will look at where we can reallocate staff and move our resources where they're most needed. So that is why that was reduced. We don't need it.
And it's funny because we're going over this budget so carefully right now, but people always comment at town meeting that we pass millions of dollars of budgets quickly. So it's good to review it like we are. But just for the record, any special education positions, as far as I'm concerned, are worth holding on to if we can. So I think we should, be just as aware of that as we are about the teachers being cut at the elementary level. And then in here, I don't see, and maybe it's on a different, professional development, is that not part of the budget for teachers and special ed at all?
Mm-hmm.
Or
Yep, that's a big part.
is it? Okay, I just don't see it, but it's in there?
You're probably not seeing it on that page.
On that, it's on
but when you dig into the budget that's online, you'll see it's under, the budget is divided up by buildings and the central office, and I believe that is under the central office.
Okay,
That's under the district
Spending.
spending.
okay.
three.
And then if you go on to the Massachusetts Department of Education website, you can look at all of the towns and what their average class size is and all sorts of data. It's pretty interesting. So I think the average in the state is 18, and that was with some outliers, like a few towns had 27 or 28, but they didn't even appear to be towns. It was some sort of charter school or something. So if we get to 23, it's a little higher than the average. But for the record, I was glad to hear that it's more about enrollment than budget.
Can I respond to that a little bit, Liz?
Yeah.
Did you say you were looking at the enrollment on DESE website?
Yeah, on the
And
DOE
So, I think on Monday night, and I'm not sure I brought it, I did look at surrounding towns, and I think what I was demonstrating is that one of the reports on DESE says we're at 16 currently, but that would be K to 12, and then they show Marblehead at 18, Linfield at 18. So the numbers you look at and the different reports you look at on DESE aren't telling you all the facts when you look at them. So there were different teacher-student ratios or class sizes that were located on that
So
site.
it's not just elementary school, it's
No,
factoring
it's right.
specialty classes at the high school.
And it's factoring that the English teacher cut at the high school, as I was explaining Monday night, there were 5 because our enrollment at the high school was 735 at that time, now it's 682. And so the smaller class sizes at the high school would impact that data because it's a K-12 report.
Okay. And then the athletic user fees increase and the student activities fees increase. Maybe this young gentleman here could take that on as far as I think you shouldn't increase it because it puts families who can't afford it at a disadvantage, and maybe they don't qualify for support, or maybe they wouldn't feel comfortable asking for it, and then we're hearing about vaping or whatever's going on. Keeping kids involved is important, and to put a strain on families who have more than one child or can't afford it just doesn't seem right, because keeping kids involved is what we want. So
Before you
keeping
go on,
that in mind.
Suzanne, is that something you want to talk about? Do you want me to talk? I just want to talk a little bit about.
Do you want to say anything? You can say, I mean, since
Yeah, I mean, for my family, it's a big burden, especially the sports fees, trying to stay involved, and it's really difficult to pay that fee every year, and there are a lot of families that maybe are a little more disadvantaged than I am, and it would be tragic to see them not tragic, but not ideal, and not sort of keeping with the vision of the school district to keep them not involved. As far as the club fees go, it's sort of interesting because that money doesn't, even as far as I'm concerned, doesn't go to the specific club. So a lot of times, like, students aren't paying that anyway, so I'm not sure how much revenue that would actually, I don't know, maybe I'm not informed, but I haven't paid my club fee. I probably shouldn't say this, but like most people aren't paying because it doesn't go to the club at all, and so it's like there's no incentive. So I don't know.
So I would encourage you to be a champion for that and try to not have those increases. Is this still working? Or?
Yes.
Okay.
I'd like to just kind of bring you up to speed. Suzanne, if you could speak to that a little bit.
Okay, so that's part of why this is still to be determined on here. But however, we have had preliminary meetings with the athletic director, and she had facts and figures from all sorts of communities and where we lie on the scale and such. And there's discussions about, changing fees for different sports or changing fees for different number of sports you play and family caps. And I mean, all those things, Liz, without a doubt, are being looked at. And like Oliver says, the club fee is really kind of seems arbitrary right now. Some people pay, some don't, but the bottom line is we need students to pay because we pay teachers stipends to administrate different clubs. So those clubs fees are important, and part of this discussion is trying to recoup all those fees and make sure that there's equity, and that we're funding things in an equitable way too. Like when we looked at athletic fees, we realized that as a district we're funding 55%. We're funding 55% of sports. Like when your children play sports, we're picking up 55% of the cost of the entire cost, and that's a little high. I mean, maybe we should be picking up 50% as a district. Maybe our policy is you pay half, we pay half, and so we're trying to work out those details and trying to make it equitable. And certainly, if your child wants to play a sport, we will never prohibit them from playing because they can't pay. There's all sorts of different mechanisms for paying to play and making sure that everyone gets to participate in every club and every sport that they want to do. But like we said, that's part of why this is still a conversation, because we really need to make sure that we do right by our students and by our teachers who are leading these different activities. Did I answer that? Okay.
And do you anticipate asking at this next town meeting, along with the budget, do you anticipate asking for a feasibility study money?
Yes.
Okay, so that is not a driver in what's happening here
No.
at all? Okay, because what I just don't want to see happen, I see with politics sometimes, is that people get an idea and you didn't see that we said we're flush with cash, but I heard that over and over again at town meeting. We're flush with cash, we're ready to go, we're poised. And people were happy to vote in, I don't want to bring it back again, but this trail for $850,000, which isn't the trail, it is the study and the design. And now we're hearing this, so what I don't want is our kids to become pawns in this game. And if you're saying they're not, that's great, I just want to make it known. And
Madam Chair,
thank you for your time.
Please.
can I just say something on that? I've heard that from a couple of different people, and I can assure everyone in this room that this committee, and I don't want to speak for other committees in town, that $850,000, that's separate from the schools. People have said to me that's a vendetta to go after people that were against the schools. And I can assure you that has nothing to do with what we're doing here as our budget process. And I can also assure you that if I ever heard that, the venue that we would be talking about it would be totally different than this venue here.
Yeah.
That is nothing, it's totally separate from our
Thank
school
you.
budget.
That's not what I'm implying. What I'm saying is, are we trying to say, oh, we're saving on the school budget, so let's fund a feasibility study? You know, let's keep them separate, because I really believe that we can get momentum for our new school without the change of the budget. You know, without changing what we're doing for our kids. Let's just keep.
Can I speak a little bit to this?
As far as the schools, and if it's separate, it's separate.
Well, one thing I want to say, let's go into FY20, and let's take back when I started in this position in this district. Much of my energy was in, yes, building bridges, but it was also in operational issues within the district. It hasn't been until recently, when Mrs. Klondike has come on board, that we've actually started to take a look at class sizes at the high school, class sizes at the middle school, class sizes at the elementary schools. So in the last year, we've been able to do so much work at the academic, talking about achievement, talking about courses, talking about rigor, talking about electives at the high school. I can tell you that going into FY20, we'll be looking at class sizes at the high school, and we'll be making recommendations that way. It's about creating efficiencies. We're starting this year at the elementary, we're looking at middle, we're looking at high school, because those conversations are a little bit more difficult with curriculum specialists. But I can tell you now, come FY20, we're going to be presenting similar information, similar efficiencies, because that's where we finally are in this district, is to tighten up our belt and do the right thing, and look at those things that we haven't had time to look at. There's been a revolving door in the superintendent's office, and in my opinion, the enrollment situation at the elementary schools, this action could have probably been taken 5, 6 years ago, 7 years ago, if I look at the history. So when you put the two, they're separate. And somebody made a comment earlier about, the K-12 task force wasn't informed about any and weren't part of these conversations. I have a K-12 task force meeting, tomorrow morning.
Right.
That's about a new school building. That's not about a budget. I
Okay.
presented my educational vision to that committee, and part of that was equity, but we're tomorrow talking about a new school. We're not talking about budget recommendations. So, in my mind, they're separate, and if that has offended people, I'm sorry, but I'll see you tomorrow morning, I hope.
Yeah, no, I'm glad to hear it, and for the record, I think that Mrs. Angelakis is right for our school district, and I'm behind you.
I
I don't
appreciate
know
that.
how I feel about the schools moving around, but I am behind you, so.
Appreciate
Thank
that,
you.
thank you.
Thanks.
Anybody? Tasia?
Hi, can you hear me?
Take it out of the stand.
Hello?
Take it out.
Okay. I'm Tasia Vasilio. I've lived in Swampscott most of my life, and I was here for your preliminary budget review meeting at the last school committee meeting, and I came on Monday night as well. When I left here on Monday, I was really hoping to come back here today and have you say that you were going to actually change your approach and just introduce this this consolidation of classes with the incoming kindergartners. I have a daughter in kindergarten, so that would impact me, but honestly, I think that is the best approach for everyone in town. It's less drastic. It will cause the least disturbance. So with that said, my biggest concern about this is class sizes. There are countless studies that show smaller class sizes in grades K through 3 have the most impact to children's overall learning. They say that 18 and below is optimum, 20 and below is like the maximum you should go. So with that, I know that there are plans to bring aides in where these class sizes most of them will be right at 23. In the preliminary budget review, you had, I believe it was 2 teachers that were going to be brought back.
There was going to be savings recognized because we were going right through 4th grade. Then we reevaluated and said that 4th graders should be able to stay, so we won't have that additional money for targeted support. Rather than having $100,000 available for targeted support, and we don't know what that's going to look like.
Right.
We'll have $50,000 this year, and then approximately $50,000 next year. So we'll be able to increase that targeted support in those classrooms.
Okay, understood. So, but eliminating the fourth grade from this proposal is 25% of the kids. Shouldn't we just see a reduction from $100,000 to $75,000 in that case? Because it's only a $50,000 line item in the budget. Does that make sense?
No, because it's a teaching position, and we're approximating at $50,000. So I'm not sure I'm understanding.
So you're getting rid of a small percentage that's going to need to change. The fourth graders is a small percentage of the group of kids that's going to be affected by this. But you're getting, so instead of keeping both aides or whatever.
Both teaching positions?
Both teaching positions. Instead of keeping both of them, you're eliminating half, which is more than, like, it's a small percentage that's being taken out. So you're overcompensating for it, it seems.
I think
I understand.
Right, but
Do you understand what I'm saying?
I'm not, if somebody wants to do
Okay.
it. I think that decision to me is the decision to keep the fourth graders where they're at. They've been the longest in the Stanley community. To finish out their careers, that's important.
Right.
I understand, and I said this Monday night, and I mean it with all sincerity. I understand what these 45 children and the 20 children at Hadley are going to go through. And I said it Monday, and maybe people think, and Clark. So we were discussing today, there are children moving from all three elementary schools. So, I think Monday night it got a little clouded with just Stanley. It's all three elementary schools. But somebody help me answer your question about eliminating the 25%.
Okay, so I think if I understand what you're saying, originally we talked about K through 4. That would have been 5 teachers. If we're averaging
Yes.
$50,000 a savings, that would have
Yes.
been $250,000.
Yes.
Add back in 100 for 2 teachers.
Right.
Now, even though we are talking about keeping fourth graders there, which is 20%,
20%, yep.
that we're still have halved the amount of money that we're adding
You're only
back in.
bringing back 50% of the teaching, or the teachers.
So I want to sort of talk about 2 different things. I think the first is that part of what went into deciding to keep the fourth graders there was not just in deference to the fact that they've been there a long time, but correct me if I'm wrong, it had a lot, just as much, if not more, to do with the fact that they were going to be transitioning into 5th grade.
Yes.
I'm totally okay with the fourth
And-
graders staying.
But I just wanted to
Yeah.
put it out there that it's also about the fact that they're going to be transitioning into 5th grade, and we didn't want them to transition twice in 2 years. Sorry, I'm having this is a new one for me. But I hear what you're saying in terms of it feeling not equitable, and we'll look at that.
Okay, thank you. Someone also mentioned the point about the kindergartners. I had made that observation where a lot of the kindergartners just started elementary school. It was a big change for them. I don't have any kids in kindergarten right now, but my other daughter was in kindergarten last year. It was a huge change for her and a big adjustment. So on that note, you're asking them to make another big adjustment again, so.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Is there anybody else?
Hi, my name is Matthew McClure. There are a number of things on the budget that was posted on the SPS 01907 Twitter.
The pages that they're on the business office website.
Okay.
Yep.
So 2 line items in particular that I was interested in understanding better. One, actually 3. There's a reduction of approximately $139,000 from Stanley teacher salaries that seems to be roughly offset by $129,000 increase in contingency salaries at the district level. And in particular, I'd like to understand what the contingency salaries are intended for at the district level.
Okay, hold on one second.
Secondly,
Well, hold on,
Can we
let's
answer
do
the-
it one at a time, okay? Would that work?
just really quick to
Okay.
finish the question. The total increase at the district level is $440,000, which is the most significant difference of any line item anywhere in the budget. And I'd like to understand what the intent of increasing the district level budget so significantly relative to individual school budget changes is.
Okay.
Thank you.
I think I understand the question. So what the gentleman's referring to is in the Stanley School budget, that is where we have.
Can you point us to the page?
Yes, page 10, if anyone is looking online or has a copy, the Stanley teaching salary line is the one that's between the regular ed line is down 111,000. That's where we've reduced the 3 positions. We don't know, one of the things we talked about on Monday was we don't know which teachers will be leaving the district, but we've identified that the reduced classes will be at Stanley, so we put the reductions of the 3 positions there. The second line there is a result of minus 28,000. That's a result of turnover or retirement savings. So that's really separate from that. So, but basically, the position reduction from the 7 sections in each grade, that's showing in the Stanley. That's the net result. Remember, there are raises for teachers that are already in, so you've got an increase, you've got a decrease. So that's why that 111,000 doesn't add up to the 50,000 times 4. Your second question on the district, the contingency salary line, that's the first line in the budget, and the line that you're referring to, that is a line where, as I mentioned, we have negotiated our contract with teachers, but still we have 25% of our salary increases hasn't been sprinkled throughout the budget because we don't know how much the raises are going to be, so that money is there. And in addition, and that amount is reduced by, there's a position, if those of you that really read the detail of that one-page handout, there's a position to be determined of $48,500. Some of you might have seen that on there. Since we don't know where that is, we reduced that amount, so that's a net figure. So anything that's unknown is in there as well. For example, if we've got some revenue in, we know that the revenue increases that haven't been applied yet are also in there, so that's a net figure. I know I'm getting pretty detailed, and if you sent me an email tomorrow, I could explain it a little bit better, but the bottom line is that's where we put all the unknowns that are increasing and any unknowns that would decrease, and the net amount is what's there. But the primary reason for the increase there are salaries which haven't yet been determined. So those, does that answer your question?
So is it purely just increases in existing positions, or is there an intention to hire a new position at the district level?
Anything that was listed on the one-page handout that doesn't have a home. So for example, that $48,500 position to be determined, that cut is in that line. All the salary increases that haven't been sprinkled out through the budget, that's where they are. We have to put them somewhere, so we put them all in one place.
What is the expected average salary increase per teacher?
We don't know. For teachers?
For teachers, we know.
Well, the teachers, the salary scale increased 1.5%.
The COLA.
Right.
But that doesn't include the steps and lanes.
Right.
And what can be understood from the total budget increase of $440,000 at the district level?
Well, in the district, if you look in the district section, I mean, certainly that line contributes, I think you said it was about $400,000, if I'm not mistaken. So $100,000 of it's that line there. I mean, there are some other decreases in there. Let me just see.
And what happens as the
We
year
have on page 3 about, which is a little ways down, there's an increase of $133,000. That is where we have put, since the English language learner teachers, what happens every year is once the profile of the students are known, those teachers get assigned to the appropriate building. So since we don't know where they're going at this point, we put all 1.5 positions in the district budget. And same with the .3 special education budget teacher, which is listed. So again, that's a place where it seemed to make the most sense to put it at the district level, since we didn't know what building it is. But when we do the budget in the fall, after everyone's been assigned, and we voted this year and then last year, we do a series of transfers. So a year from now, when you're looking at this budget, you'll see that that line is lower, and the English language learner teachers would be in the appropriate buildings. But so you've got that first budget line, the contingency, then you've got that. And we increased the substitute line, the district substitute line, by $50,000. And we increased the phone budget, that was listed. We had maintenance overtime. And so that's a quick explanation of $441,000.
Okay, so if I understand correctly, the one significant factor is that there are non-regular education teachers, and it's not immediately clear where they need to be allocated.
Right.
So they appear at the district level and will be allocated to individual schools at a future date.
It's primarily unassigned salaries, so either unassigned positions or unassigned salary increases that will be dispersed.
Thanks.
So, and actually, I'm going to use this as an opportunity to point out one thing that doesn't increase in the district budget that I mentioned was special education. In prior years, you would probably see a much larger increase if we had to increase our special education tuition line, which is one of our biggest non-salary lines. You would have seen the increase here. I didn't mention that because, as I said earlier, we still want to work with the selectmen and the finance committee, and then ultimately with town meeting, to figure out how to fund special education tuition and transportation increases. So that is not in here because we haven't increased that part of the budget.
Thanks very much.
Sarah?
Hi, Sarah Branya. I just would like to ask that you please consider a phased approach for the changes you're thinking of implementing, as opposed to kind of ripping off the Band-Aid and affecting so many teachers and so many kids, our youngest population. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, my name's Jackie Shanahan. I have a Precinct 6. I have a Stanley kid, a middle school kid, and I'm actually a Hadley graduate myself. I just had some questions about the supplemental hallway learning. Is that not allowed by law? It's not.
Could you
Okay,
repeat
so
that? The supplemental learning going on in the hallways, is that not allowed? It's not best practice for sure.
Right, obviously.
And
I don't know.
The fire department is not happy.
Right.
And I'm sure Ted could speak to that maybe a little bit more, but they don't want the halls crowded because in case we have to evacuate.
I understand
There are
that.
obstacles.
Um,
And it's not primarily special education. There are some, a lot of it is general education.
Supplemental, like
Yep,
extra
Tier
help?
2 instruction.
Okay, would you agree that this isn't a unique issue to Swampscott, that there are other schools doing this in the hallways?
I will say I was on the walk with the MSBA when they came through. I think they were fairly astounded by the conditions of our 3 elementary schools.
Okay.
And they took us back after we had voted down in 2014, and I think they felt the difference about the town, that we've done a lot of work to help support that decision, but I also think they realized the incredible need that we are in for a new building.
Can I just add, it's not illegal,
Yeah.
and it's not uncommon to go into an older elementary school and maybe see one setup, that they took a little corner. The problem in our schools at Clark and Stanley, it's on every floor, in every corner, outside almost every classroom. So the amount that is happening in our district is what is inappropriate. It does happen in other schools, but it would be a table here, a table there. You saw storage bins and whole libraries out in the hallway. That didn't even show you the kindergarten coat hooks or first grade coat hooks that are attached to the outsides of the walls.
Mm-hmm.
So, when we do our fire drills, are there kids in those learning spaces outside? Probably not. They're all in their classrooms, the chairs are tucked in. And so it's not illegal, but it is not best practice.
Okay, so if we did free up in Stanley, for example, 4 classrooms, those would all be utilized for the supplemental learning that's presently in the hallway?
I can't say, one of them would be used for the special education program that's moving from Clark, so that leaves us 3. And then we would definitely use some of those spaces creatively with office blocks or whatever to set up the learning environments within those classrooms, yes.
Okay. So, I mean, I definitely agree that we're all on the same team. I mean, this is the consequences that we're facing from not picking, electing to have the new school built, and now we're going through the whole process again. And so that's a consequence you have to deal with. It's a consequence that we as parents have to deal with. But I see what you're showing with class sizes, and I understand your justification that the parents have, the teachers have had classes that large in the past, and so they can do it again. 22 kids, 23 kids is too big for a classroom, and it doesn't allow any cushion. 18 does. I think that you're asking too much of the teachers already, and I know that they can do it, and I know that they've handled it in the past, but ideally the attention that the child is going to get is from their teacher and not necessarily from a paraprofessional. And I think the attraction to suburban living as opposed to urban living, which I experienced before with 26, 28 kids in a classroom, is part of the attraction, for people to move. And, practically speaking, if you have one disruption repeatedly in a classroom, most of the day is going to be spent managing discipline and not focused on education. And then, as far as the children go, I definitely appreciate what you're doing and why, but I do think as far as the kids go, when they enter into a school and when you send them to a school, and sometimes it's not always in the neighborhood that they live in, there's a covenant with that child, and the covenant is, this is going to be your school and this is where you're going to go. And even though we do face budget issues, it doesn't seem like the roof is on fire at this point, and that might be a different conversation. But right now, there's a covenant with that kid that you have sent them there. And some of the kids that should have gone to Hadley School are at Stanley, for example, and may ultimately end up back at Hadley School. And, that's a lot to ask of kids this age. They're elementary age, and I don't agree with the rollout of that. And perhaps leveling it off in a different way, or finding another line item like the professional development, perhaps, I don't know, is a better way to do that. But I just want to, obviously that, but I've heard a lot of discussion about the budget and not so much about the individual kids and the practical realities of that, and explaining to, a 6-year-old or a 7-year-old or an 8-year-old who've bonded with these kids over 2-3 years at this point, that they're going to be removed. Even for the kids that aren't maybe going to leave, that might stay, someone close to them might be going. So that's all. Thank you.
Thank you. Martha, can you speak to that at all?
I can talk about, we already do move students. We move students with IEPs actually every single year. So families in our district have gone through this, and the teachers do a very good job, and the principals do, and the support staff do, welcoming those families in. And while I know the initial time when you move is very difficult, once they get there, they're very welcomed into their new school. And we all really are one community, even though I know people get very attached to their school. We do it, and it's very successful. So people are experienced with it.
Hi, my name is Lindsay. I have a son at Stanley School. I just had a quick question based on your comment that you've known that the enrollment as well as the numbers in schools have needed some changes for the past few years. And I'm just wondering, as people have said, right now it feels like we're ripping the Band-Aid off. Why have we not changed where kindergartners are going over the past few years? Why are we suddenly changing 4 grades at once instead of doing the gradual effect since the moment you knew that this was an issue at hand?
We just recognized this issue when we got into the budget season this year. As I
Okay,
said,
it's contradicting what you said. You said you've known that enrollment as well as some of these changes was, I believe you said about the last 5 years.
Okay, are you saying, I'm not hearing you right, so can you say the question again?
I'm saying you made a comment earlier saying that you knew enrollment as well as some of these issues as far as where kids would go in buildings. You knew some of these issues were at hand over the last 5 years.
So if I'm hearing, and I think it's
And I'm
fair.
just clarifying based on
Yeah,
some
no, I think-
people I was
Yeah,
sitting
could
with
these
that maybe we
decisions-
misheard.
Could they have been made earlier? Yes, but they haven't. Last bubble year we actually had was in 8th grade. We're actually the class size, we had 8 sections, and the class sizes were similar to what we're gonna be proposing for next year. But there are certain, if rolling it out also has certain issues that can happen, because you may end up still with class sizes. We have siblings. Say at Stanley, we stayed at, went right to 2 sections. You may still end up with really large class sizes there, because we really want to keep siblings together, and we have specialized programs there. So really, when we looked at it individually and phasing it in, it caused a whole other host of issues that probably people wouldn't know unless they're looking at the whole picture. In terms of phasing in special education programs and phasing them and moving them, that might require hiring additional staff, which would actually increase the budget. So there's just so many other issues, I guess, that
Yeah, and I'm
come
just
to
solely
play.
speaking from someone who newly moved to the area last year, whose son is at Stanley, and I personally would have appreciated having been placed elsewhere to begin with, instead of having, again, another kindergarten change. Not only did a year ago we moved from a new state, that was traumatic. Now I might have to go and tell my child, just kidding, you might go somewhere separate from your neighbors, from your friends that you've established. And I'm really hoping that the schools are prepared to help parents with this transition, with the counselors, with different things, and to work with us on that, because I think the social and emotional impact on these kids is going to be greater than you really realize, because I understand a lot of you have kids in the school district. I'm not sure how many have it in the K through 4 right now and are really going to be hands-on going through this and are going to be right in the trenches with the rest of us having to deal with this at home and at school. And the only other thing that I will say is something that really drew us to Swampscott versus even a Marblehead, even a Beverly, even different areas, was the low class sizes. Somebody coming from a state, and somebody who's been a special education educator in a different state, I think that's what appealed to us. If I was seeing this conversation a year ago, the changes would have been different. And to hear that some of this is more of a want than a need as far as classrooms, hallway classrooms, I think that's a little, I don't know. I can say for one, I don't agree with it. Like, I think you have to understand if something is really needed or if it's just something that you want, and think about what the citizens of the town are asking you to do and to think about. And that's all.
I want to address one of the unintended consequences that would be if this did happen slowly. If we were looking at phasing it in, and you were a 3rd grade teacher, for example, and next year we're kindergarten, and you knew that this was coming down the pike, the likelihood is that you would get your resume out there pretty fast and start looking for another job. And then we would be looking to fill a position for a very short amount of time, and we wouldn't be drawing from the best pool that we could, because we would be looking for teachers who would accept a 1-year, 2-year, 3-year assignment, basically knowing that that it was going to change sooner than later. So it's, sort of having that hanging over you creates a pall, if you will, as you're just waiting. It's just one of the considerations.
Madam Chair, just to answer Lindsay's question, I know myself, I have a 3rd grader. Gargi has a student on the elementary end as well. And I have 2 college students, as the other board members do, that have gone through the process. So when you say social and emotional well-being, that is very dear not only to the committee members' hearts, but that is a passion that the superintendent has.
Mr. Pastor?
Thank you. I'm Glenn Pastor. If you can pardon my voice, it's a little straggly. I live on Pine Hill Road, Precinct 4. I'm past vice chair of the school committee, past vice chair of the school building committee, and current member of the communications committee. I rise just to maybe give a little context to some folks in here. First of all, it's great to see a bunch of people who I've never met. That just shows that a lot of people are getting involved. I mean, for me, it's been a long time. I have a 21-year-old who is a special ed student who has another year, who leaves the district January 13th of next year. On his 22nd birthday, he is out. So that is a difficult transition. He's out, gone. State, federal law, 22 years old, that's it. And I have juniors at the high school who are having a very good experience, actually. So I got involved in this, and I'll ask for your deference as I kind of give you a little bit of a history, and I'll get to my point at the very end. I became involved in this when I met, I'll never remember your last name now, at the time.
My old name.
Martha Keenan, in January of January of the year 2000. We were much younger then. And I met Martha and the superintendent at that time, Dr. Brian Coughlin. And my wife and I went in, I had a newly diagnosed child in a wheelchair, and Dr. Coughlin opened his drawer and pretended to say, "Don't worry about it, the money will always be here." That was quite a statement, and I knew nothing about special education law. I knew nothing about how the system worked. But at that point, we decided to become a little bit involved, and through Martha's help and through the various superintendents, I was asked to sit on a committee to hire a new special education director back in the day. Really became involved when the Michon School was closed. Dr. Malone was hired, and that was traumatic for students, teachers alike. Numerous layoffs. Virtually, if I remember, and I did Google it, I couldn't find it, I think it was 70-some-odd% of the elementary school students transferred. And it was one fell swoop because it was the only way to do it. And you know what? They all survived. So that led me to run for school committee and was elected. So my first day at school committee school, the head of the Mass School Committee Association introduces himself and says, "There's really only one rule here. Your children are important to you, but no one else. Once you take that oath of office, the district students come first." As difficult as that is, and trust me when I tell you, it is very difficult, but that's what has to happen. And we made, when I was a school committee member, challenging decisions. There were a couple layoffs when I was a school committee member. There was a challenge with the band, there was a challenge with art. And that's when parents came out. But it was a learning experience, and I continued to learn about special education law. And I'm a marketer by trade, but a lot of the discussions going on tonight, really everyone, I implore you to read as much as you can to educate yourself. Because the folks up there definitely have the hardest job in the community. It's much harder being a school committee member than a selectman, because there's nothing more important than our children. And when the superintendent, who I've known since when Pam was a principal at Stanley, they have your children's best thoughts in mind. So I'll talk a little bit about school transition. My oldest son was in the district until, I believe it was 6th grade, if I remember. The first 5 years at Clark, where there's an unbelievable principal, Miss Murphy. Mrs. Murphy said, "As long as he's here, we will educate that child." Lo and behold, they did. We stayed 1 year too long, as everybody said at the time, but we held tough. I mean, I was a school committee member. I wanted him in district. My wife's an elementary school teacher in Brookline. We wanted him in district. It just didn't work. However, his last year at Clark, because that was the only school that was accessible, my twin boys started kindergarten. They went to Clark, even though we live in the Stanley district. When my oldest son went up to the middle school, there was no question. I was given, this is how it is, your twin boys are going to Stanley School. And you know what? It was harder on me, it was harder on my wife than it was on the kids. Kids go the first day, the next thing I know, they come outside, hi, I want to play with so-and-so and so-and-so. Because your children, through sports, activities, they know most of the kids. And I know it's hard. Trust me, it was hard on my wife and I. But it's easier on the kids than it is on the parents. And I have the full faith of the folks who we pay to make sure our children are educated, to walk them through that transition. A couple other points. It's great to hear people talk about a potential new school. I'm going to say right up front, it should have been done when I spent 4 years trying to do it. I understand it didn't get done. We're trying it again. To the woman who spoke earlier about, she wanted to make sure that the MSBA thinks Swampscott's ready. The MSBA already said yes, so we're already in the process. So regardless of kind of what happens, we're there. The feasibility study dollars, someone had mentioned that they want to make sure it doesn't come from the school budget. That's illegal. Feasibility dollars come from the town, it's bonded. And if I remember from last time, we received 45% reimbursement. I'm sure it's going to be around the same thing, a little bit higher, a little bit lower. But please waylay your fears. That money has nothing to do with the school budget. It comes from the town side. It's really clear.
Can I just interrupt on something? I don't want that information out there. Because this is our second time around with the MSBA, they will reimburse $0 on our feasibility study.
They will. Thank you. I didn't know that.
No, it's a bit disappointing, but it's the reality of going through it a second time.
Right. Thank you.
However, there is talk, correct me if I'm wrong, that we'll be able to make use of a fair amount of what we discovered the last time, that we're not starting from zero.
That's good to know, because in the few years, not a whole lot has changed. Just, again, I listening to a couple people as I was walking in, and one of the questions was, well, if the district does build a school, how long would it take for it to build and when would it be open? And that's the hardest part about everyone sitting in here. The reality is, it takes 6 years from today through all the studies, through all the votes, and 3 years to build. So you're looking 2023, 2024, 2025. And I know for me, well, I'm going to be long gone other than some nephews and nieces. So I don't want to get off track. I just do want to tell everybody, we have a great school system. It's not perfect. There's no such thing as perfect. And whether there's 18 kids, 20 kids, hopefully not a whole lot more than 22, 23 children, the educators really do know what they're doing. They have degrees, they have advanced degrees. And us as parents, we look at this little bubble of our family, our friends. But the folks up here and the folks in the classroom, they have to look at everything. And when we make a change like is proposed, it really is better just to do it in one fell swoop. And I do promise you, the kids will always react better than the parents. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Jennifer Despo. I just had a couple of questions and a point to make. First, earlier when you responded to, phasing it in and that perhaps your best educators would leave, I think that point may be missing some things. Of course, there could be retirements, and you've already indicated that this is just the first phase of this, moving to efficiency. So if I was a middle school or high school teacher, I would also see the writing on the wall that those jobs may also be in jeopardy in the next few years, and perhaps this is a message we don't want to give our educators. But my other point was to the percent change in the budget, because I noticed that in the areas where, the years that it was increased, I don't have the numbers that you had up there, but when it was around the 2.5% increase, it seemed that those were the years that had a lot higher class sizes, that they seemed dramatically higher. Those were the years that, when the superintendent had those numbers up during your presentation, were 24, 25. And so my concern is that if we're, sort of correcting it back to about an increase of 2.5%, what's the long-term vision for these classroom sizes, because my concern is that this seems like it's going to just be a trend that's going to continue once we make that correction.
Forgive me, but were you there on Monday night? Because I don't want to repeat if you heard the information about.
I was not, but I
Okay,
received much of
So
it.
one of the things that is a concern is that, some of the class sizes are starting at 23. And the concern I heard from the teachers was, what about all the kids that come enroll in the district during the summer? What I shared at both of those meetings on Monday, that on average, we have about 50 students, it was 49 last year, withdraw in grade levels K through 4. So each year, there's 50 that leave, there's 50 that come in. So I don't necessarily see these class sizes, according to the professional projections of enrollment, going up significantly so that we do have class sizes of 24 or 25. I don't see that happening.
Consistently?
Yes,
Even though when it was the years, it was about 3%, those class sizes seem consistent over 3 to 4 years, 5 years that you were quoting.
But there were other budget cuts happening at that time as well. Do you want to speak, Mr. Katz?
Any building?
Just wanted to share enrollment, some recent enrollments. The K-5 enrollments this year is 945 as of October 1st. A year ago, October 1st, was 933, which was 12 less. And 2 years ago, October 1st, was 946. So basically, it's 946, 933, and 945. 3 years in a row. It's essentially flat, which I think supports that there are a lot of people moving in, but there's a lot of people moving out, and it's pretty much evened out. And then we just got a draft report from the New England School Development Council that does our enrollment projections, and the projections for the next 4 years for elementary level are all below 950 for K-5. The number of births in town has remained fairly constant, and they haven't picked up, and I know clearly there's been construction in town. There's more housing units going in. It may begin to show up in our enrollment projections, but for the last 3 years, our enrollments have been stable, and they're projected to be stable for the next few years. But I think what the superintendent has said earlier is that we'll be monitoring this, and if things drastically change, I'm sure that the school committee and the superintendent will respond. But the information that we have right now shows that we've been stable for 3 years, and we're expecting to be stable for the next few years in the K-5 range, so that the 21 to 23 range for class sizes seems to be something that's going to continue.
I also want to point out that there are years we get bubble years. All of a sudden, you never know what happens. For example, our current 8th grade has 201 students in it. I'm not going to squeeze those kids in 7 sections. Obviously, we'd have to reevaluate with the committee and make exceptions and perhaps put it in 8th class. We're not about not addressing bubble years if they happen. But with all the information we have currently, it would work in 7 sections.
But it does seem that 21 to 23 is an acceptable class size going forward for Swampscott Public Schools. That's something that's acceptable.
It is in the way that we're going to use the support with the extra savings and targeted supports in those classrooms. So when we talk about class sizes of 18 with 1 teacher, or you're talking about 22 or 23 with 1.5 people in that room, or maybe 2.0, or then your class size is still relatively small. And we do have expert teachers. I know the profiles of our kids. I've taught with 23. I know it was years ago, but class sizes can be small with the targeted support we put in there for the students and for the teachers.
I guess my concern, again, is with the increase in special ed students and the increase in class size. It just seems to be something that's a disconnect.
We will keep our eye on it.
Thank you.
Hello, good evening. My name's Heather Hussein, and I have a first grader in Clark. And I have a couple of questions, so I'll just throw them out and then you can answer. And this is regard to the hallway class teaching. So how long has the situation of hallway teaching been occurring at both Stanley and Clark? And with the 1 classroom, I believe, that will be leaving Clark, or that group of students, will that help alleviate the hallway teaching at Clark? Thank you.
Okay. How long have we known? Well, I left Stanley about 5 years ago, 6 years ago. There was never as much. Every year it's increased so that the first day of school, those tables aren't necessarily there. By mid-year when I visit the schools, all of a sudden I'm bumping into tables. So it's not like we've known about this for a long time. It's just seemed to be increasing. The state mandates of what we have to deliver for services are increasing, and so more spaces have been created. That one classroom that moves, I don't see it as one breakout space, so I see several of those smaller areas going in there, maybe in a quad or something. We are going to move them out of the hallway as well.
Okay, thank you. Hi, my name is Lara Goodman. I have 2 boys at the Stanley School, and we have been thrilled with the teachers there. And both some of the newer hires and teachers who have been there for a long time. And I am so pleased that Swampscott has been able to attract and maintain such strong educators. I wonder, with the teachers having gotten no advance notice about this, and them being worried about losing their jobs, how we can expect to continue to attract these fabulous educators, and how we can expect them to stay when we are not offering them job security. And on top of that, I agree with you about the spaces at the schools. I also see that with classes of 22, 23 kids, my sons are in classes of 22 currently at Stanley. There are too many kids in the class now. The classrooms themselves are overcrowded. And I think about putting more kids in those classes, and I just wonder how that can work.
Thank you. Yes, before you answer?
Do you want to talk about?
One of the things that I would say to you, and I said this the other night, so forgive me for those of you that are hearing a second time, is we've recently visited a lot of new elementary schools, and they talk about the breakout spaces. And in 2014, we talked about breakout spaces. In my educational opinion, we put in the targeted support.
Can I just ask you, is the targeted support paraprofessionals, or are they actually teachers?
We don't know what it's going to look like. We're going to look at the needs of each of the classrooms.
Okay.
And having taught a larger class size, that person can take students into these breakout spaces so that you're really down to, a class of 18 during some of the most important instructional times, whether it be literacy blocks or math blocks that are going on, that all those students' bodies don't have to be in there. So there's some small group instruction going on in the other spaces.
But you were, as I understood it, there would be one paraprofessional or teacher per grade level?
We don't know what it's going to look like yet.
So I just don't see how frequently those kids would be in the breakout space. Like, how much of the day would the teacher be working with the larger class size versus how much of the day would the teacher have a smaller class size? To me, it seems like most of the day, she would still have a lot of, let alone the needs. You would, of course, have more kids that may have larger educational needs in each classroom, but you would just have more kids in each classroom on top of that.
Well, remember also that in addition to holding on to this budget for extra, that we also still have the paraprofessionals who are there. We have the Title I, we have the tutors. So all of that is still happening, and it's not just about other teachers going in, but it's also about taking kids out.
Mm-hmm.
So that it isn't that, while we've talked a lot tonight about this, the savings and hanging on to a particular teacher, we still have the other paraprofessionals, the other ESPs, the other ABA
Well, this is
tutors.
going on right now, and so...
and will continue.
The amount, I can't tell you the percentage of time they have all the students in front of them, but on any given day when I visit the elementary schools, there's 4 or 5 kids missing already. They're already seeing a literacy specialist, the Title I tutor. So this would just be added space to have those breakout sessions. I couldn't give you a percentage. I'd be lying. I'd be saying I'm making it up. So, but
Okay.
I appreciate your comments.
I too would like to voice that I would rather see it as a phase-in. To me, I guess I'm also curious. I would imagine you asked your staff and your teachers how they want to handle it. How did they respond?
How they wanted to handle the transitions?
If you addressed them, did you ask them, these are the budgetary constraints I'm under, what do you see as a solution?
With all due respect, we don't...
That's not, okay.
The school committee's in charge of budget, and so
that's
it's
not
at a
just,
higher
that's just
level.
not how it's done, okay, sorry.
Well, but your leadership team.
The leadership team represents the teachers,
Oh, okay.
right?
And
They were the 3 elementary principals were in support of this as well.
Okay,
Thank you. But we don't have individual conversations with the teachers, is what I was saying regarding budget.
All right, thank you.
I think one of the,
Can you summarize what we heard, or-
okay, so I do want to say, we definitely hear that there is a tremendous concern about phasing in versus doing it all at once. So if that's what you want to say, we've heard that, and we will absolutely take that into consideration. We appreciate that. I just want to make sure that that we're talking about new things.
So one of the things that, I'm Liz, I have a kindergartner at Stanley.
What's your last name?
Bilodeau. And one of the things that you said earlier was, when we were talking about the phase-in approach, was teachers knowing that they could be losing their jobs in the years ahead. I guess, what's the difference between that and the 4 teachers that are going to be losing a position? And also, how are they going to be feeling, working with our kids for the rest of this year, knowing whether or not they may not be here next year?
That was.
Yeah, that's to me.
I can speak from my experience. I came in this district almost 29 years ago. Every single year as a non-professional status teacher, we got what was called pink slips. And being naive and straight out of college, I thought it would be pink, and it wasn't. It was just a letter. And everybody was cut. And then they hired back. I'm not diminishing the fact, and I am really sensitive to the fact that we will be reducing by 4 teachers. But they're non-professional status teachers. And when you take a job in a position in the district, and I interview each one individually and sign contracts with them, their goal is to reach professional status. And they're aware, though it hurts, that there is no job security until you reach professional status. It doesn't make it easier. I've met everybody on staff. I've interviewed them. I've spoken to them. It's not something I'm looking forward to having a conversation about with them, but there is something about that first 3 years of your teaching. Once you get professional status beyond that, you have job security. So I guess that's all I can say to that.
So the definition of professional status is, it's not an education level, it's once you've been teaching for 3 years?
Yes.
Just because I'm not
Yes,
I don't know.
and
So
that's a
just-
good question, and it's in the district. So there are some people that leave other districts that have already attained professional status, and when they come into our district, they're starting at year 0, and they have to do another 3 years. So it's a difficult conversation, but it's one they know coming in. The goal is professional status, which is why we celebrate it as a staff at opening day. We celebrate the teachers that have reached professional status. So I hope I've answered your question.
It's not unlike tenure.
That's the new language.
It's just new language.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Hi, I'm Karen Murphy, and I have a student at Stanley, excuse me, and also at the middle school.
What grade at Stanley, Karen?
She's in 3rd grade. So I also have 1 niece and 3 nephews at Stanley. So big Stanley family here. So I'm actually, this is kind of awkward, I'm not that concerned about the moving of the children between schools. I actually think kids are really malleable. We moved from Buenos Aires back to Swampscott, and my son did 3 days of school in Spanish and finished the week in English, and he's okay. And I think we have a great community, and I'm not that concerned about the movement between schools. I like to look at it more of a community effort, and I'm really excited about listening more about the potential of a new school, because quite honestly, I work in the private sector and I haven't been that involved, so shame on me. Because I work in the private sector and I have a full-time job and I'm on 2 nonprofit boards, I don't get to school as much as I would like to, but I do volunteer in the library at Stanley, or I used to, and I'm a class mom. And I can wholeheartedly tell you that I don't have any professional experience teaching. And when I go into that classroom and I see what the teachers are up against, my hat goes off to each and every one of them. And I don't know how we can ask the teachers to deal with an increased class size. That is my concern. I'm really worried about that. It seems very overwhelming, and I worry about the anxiety that it might cause to the teachers and the kids. I'm really worried about how the teachers feel right now that know that this is happening. I got the message through my daughter that said, please get your parents involved, and if they care about the teachers, tell them to show up. So that's why I'm here tonight. I think we can do better. I don't know enough about funding. I want to think about, can we do the crowdfunding that Emily suggested, or find a private donor to just solve this until we can get to the new school. But I'm worried about the impact that this is going to have on our teachers, and how we can expect our teachers to come to school and bring their best every day when they're looking at this. And by the way, my daughter is one of those students that learns in the hallway, and unfortunately it wasn't working for her. She was having a really hard time with math, and her scores were not increasing, so we found a Swampscott teacher that's currently in the school district to tutor her at home in a private setting, and she's doing amazing now. So I think we have amazing teachers that I want to support, and I'm just really worried about the classroom size. So
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So we'll take one more question and then move on to the rest of our business.
Hi, Katie. I'm Katie Arrington. I'm a Clark parent. I'm also a PTO board member.
Could you just say your last name one more time?
Sorry, Katie Arrington. Okay. I have a second grader at Clark. Some of the questions or chatter at Clark has been about the children that will be moving, and how that's going to be determined, and if children who are on 504s are at risk for being moved. That's just what several questions that I'm getting that I don't have the expertise to answer. So.
The other night, Katie, I know you were at the Monday night session, and we showed a criteria we're using. Yep. And we will be using that as a guide. We haven't started that yet, so there's no yes or no to that, I think. Okay. I think the
People aren't being selected by if they're on a 504.
We're not looking at categories.
That's not what, it's by where you live.
Right.
Okay. That's how you would be moved.
Gotcha.
Okay. Awesome. Yeah.
Thank you. Okay, thanks. I think we have one more.
Okay, please. And then let's...
Hi, my name is Terry Lorber. I'm a Swampscott taxpayer. I'm
Terry, what was your last name?
Lorber, L-O-R-B-E-R. A lot of great points made tonight. I think classroom size has been brought up, and I think that's a really important one. As you said earlier, we're dealing with it now with para helpers, or people who aren't teachers, which I think is a shame, because I want a teacher in the classroom with my children. And so we were moving in the wrong direction there. It's unacceptable as it is now, and it seems like we're just going to make it worse. Okay. Once you give up money, you don't get it back. So as a Swampscott taxpayer, I'm proud to see us over 4% growth the last few years. I've been in the school since fiscal year 12, and I've known from then that there's inequity between the 3 elementary schools. So I don't think it's something that just happened at the beginning of this year. So it seems like we've been grappling with these issues for a long time, and instead of trying to make things better, we're sort of moving in the wrong direction, and that's a shame. So I would urge you to think about your priorities of class size and budget appropriately, and then be confident that the taxpayers in this room who value education will support you. These are the people that you need on your side to get a new building. Don't alienate them. The operating budget is the operating budget is one thing. The capital expenditures are something else. We will go to the mat for you to get you a building, and that will solve all these crowding issues. Don't make the school system worse while we wait for that to happen. Thank you.
Okay. I would love the school committee members to have an opportunity to speak to this, if you haven't already said what you want to say. Anybody?
You want me to go?
Yeah, please.
I think that there was some great conversation tonight. Personally, I welcome the comments, because sometimes I think there's a perception that if there's an issue, it can't get presented in an effective manner. And we all know effective management without effective leadership is a problem. That was an article I saw today. I want to just touch base quickly on, I think Mrs. Katz, if I'm wrong. Probably about a year and a half ago, we were discussing some building issues, and I suggested that we go through a tour as a committee, and it's trickled to the Board of Selectmen and Finance Committee. And being a student at Stanley in 1975, I was completely horrified by the hallway learning. I think we can do better for our children. Being the liaison for special ed from the committee, having some of the special ed kids in the hallway being assisted, they already have a barrier. And in my opinion, the breakouts would make that student feel more comfortable and overcome the barrier that is presented to him with the assistance of a paraprofessional or the dedicated special ed students we have. As a committee member, I can tell you that our best intentions are for each and every student. For me personally, there's 2 days of the year that I look forward to. One is kindergarten, when you see the little young girls and boys walking in. And the other favorite day for me is graduation, when those young boys and girls are now young adults representing the community. We do have a partnership with many in the community. And as committee members, we do have various opinions. We talk frequently. We don't violate the open meeting law. We don't always agree, but we do agree on the best intentions for what is best for the district, not only emotionally and socially, but financially. On the financial aspect, I'd say to you, a couple of years ago, we had a .5 athletic director. When that athletic director was called to the meeting to compare how many students we had to the monies that we had in, they did not materialize in a productive manner. Seeing that, we decided to switch from a .5 to a full 1.0. In the meeting that we had last week with Kelly Fowley, we do have still some work to do with the athletic directors. My suggestion is that we go for the Collins Center and see if we can get some parity for athletic fees. As I stated, I do have 2 older kids that went through the Clark. I feel the kindergarten anxiety. I do agree with Mr. Pastor on 2 things. One, Mrs. Murphy, when my children were there and the anxiety was there for the kindergarten, she echoed similar statements to me and said, Ted, the safest place for children psychologically is a school building. Don't worry about anything else. And I also agree with Mr. Pastor that the kids do socialize, and I would take my 3rd grader now when he comes from basketball or religious ed, and I see him talking to a student, and he'll say his name is Tom, he's from the Hadley, or another boy that he knows from the Stanley. I just ask that our responsibilities of policy, the superintendent, the business manager, and the budget. And I know that we spent countless hours each week on the budget. The leadership that we have with the superintendent, we had turnover. We do have a strong leadership team now with Anne Marie, with Mr. Katz, and the direction of the district is going forward. We do need some help in regards to years forward in regards to a building. A 2.5 or a 2.7 will compare us to FY15, and we're doing the best that we can. And I do suggest that if you have comments, email us. I would love to see this amount of people at a school committee meeting on a frequent basis, and thank you for your time.
Okay. Hearing from people tonight was really helpful, and there's a lot of people that I know and I really respect their opinion, and I heard a lot of helpful bits of information and pieces of your lives, and it's given me stuff to think about and process, before we actually vote on this. But in general, I'm comfortable where we're going, and basically because the one thing I keep coming back to, after I listened on Monday to the conversations with the parents and the teachers, and especially after tonight, is that we have a solid budget. We are running a really tight ship. We're educating kids in really great ways throughout the whole district, and our budget, and we're being responsible and keeping our budget at a manageable growth. And I know we're talking about reduction of the number of classrooms in each grade, but this decision isn't simply a budget decision. I mean, this is more of an important policy decision, and it happens to have a financial upside for us right now. But the decision isn't solely about saving money, because if it were, we wouldn't be putting ourselves through this. We'd be finding a lot more really less controversial ways to reduce our expenses. But the superintendent's goal, not her goal really, her obligation, is to account for all the students in the district and to make decisions which are on balance, the best in the best interest of all the students. And that's a tough job. And we need to address the gross disparity in where and how we deliver special education right now. And the inequity, I agree, it has been around for a while. That there's no really glossing over that. But the superintendent spent a lot of time with the budget on Monday talking about, when she took the helm here, she spent a lot of years, and the school committee spent a lot of years sort of cleaning things up from the years of turnover and trying to increase the budget to make up for, deferred maintenance and inadequate technologies and, some personnel issues. And we spent lots of money on stuff that wasn't educational. And then after a couple years, and we peeled back the layers of the onion and we really got to business, we've really been able to educate. And now with the Mrs. Condite coming on board and Mrs. Raymond taking her position, we've really gotten down to the nuts and bolts of educating and like the superintendent said, really looking at programming finally and looking at, examining curriculum at the high school and looking at finally, we had the enrollment numbers forever, right? We've talked about how consistent they are, it's no surprise we've had the enrollment numbers, but we've never really looked at them to see that, wow, we really shouldn't have 8 classes. We should have 7 because our enrollment, we're finally to that place where we're really delving into educational program and stuff. And so I'd say that for decades, we've had this inequality and it's gotten worse because now we have a 95% handicap accessible building, and we've moved a lot of special ed programs over there, and we do have issues with learning spaces in town, and if they were all together, we wouldn't have these issues because we could rearrange in other ways. But since we have 3 different buildings, we have these issues, and it's at a breaking point now. And as we continue to, we're obligated to provide these programs and continue to shift spaces. But the breaking point is now. We're out of room. We've divided classrooms. We've divided libraries. We have 3 programs going on in the library at Stanley. We have 3 going on in the library at Clark. We've divided classrooms so that two classrooms are being taught simultaneously. I can't even imagine how distracting that is for the teachers and the students. But the good news is that our current enrollment numbers right now and that the current strength of our educational program has in our district right now has allowed us to be able to do this course correction now. Better late than never, but we're at a really good place to do this now, and there might be some flexibility in the details of how this happens, but I believe this plan does need to be implemented. The superintendent and her leadership, the principals and the other administrative staff and support staff, they have over 100 years of educational experience and probably over 50 years just in this district alone. And they've considered options, and they've shared with us their thought process. They've looked at educational considerations. Certainly, they've looked at social and emotional considerations, as that's really one of the main goals since the superintendent's been in charge here. And and they've shared their professional opinion that we have highly capable teachers, and the anticipated increase in classroom size isn't going to materially impact student learning. I mean, it's going to be tough, and it's a challenge, but we're in a really good place to meet that challenge right now. And we know we have teachers, and we know we have support, and we know we have parents that are all going to pitch in and help. And I mean, it's just important that we understand that this decision is about policy. It is about us taking the reins and controlling our destiny and making that's it, basically. So, and it's important for the welfare today and in the future of our children and our school district. That's my thoughts.
So my thoughts, I guess, are similar, but I just want to take a little step back because I heard people talking about, if we knew about this, why is it just happening now? And I just want to make the distinction that while, the learning's been happening in the hallways for a while, and the inequity's been going on for a long time, we have to remember that there was a rotating superintendents for many, many years. We had, rotating principals. We had very inconsistent and, not stable leadership in the district. And even with that, we did try to build a new school to address these issues, but it was voted down. So, we now have a stable superintendent in place, but it still took her several years to build her team, and we have that in place now. And you alluded to that, but I just felt it needed to be repeated because you need that in place before you can really dig into these things. So, it may seem like, it's just popping up, but yet you knew about it for a long time, so why is it just happening now? Well, because we needed all those pieces of the puzzle to be in place before we could get there. And, I feel like the budget and the actions that we're outlining reflect the short-term goals that we've set, meeting these inequities and trying to address those issues, as well as long-term planning, which is, we haven't been great about that in this town. So it's not necessarily about needing more money or fundraising, but rather, spending wisely and responsibly. And, looking at what we're doing and evaluating that. I look at these actions as a correction. The classes to enrollment, they got out of whack over the years. And these kinds of corrections are never pleasant, and everyone understands that. We all have kids in the district. But, we need to look at the long-term strength of the district and, and what we're trying to do, not just today, but in the future. And, making these kind of resets is necessary. It's necessary in every organization, business, government. You always have to look at what you're doing and adjust to the current and future needs. And, there's always some pain involved. And, unfortunately, you do that to get the long-term benefits.
I would just like to pretty much echo what Suzanne and Karen had said. I would also like to thank Pam, Evan, and the leadership team for presenting us with this budget. I appreciate that we are looking into smarter programming efficiencies. As Karen mentioned, when I started on the committee 3 years ago, it was a lot of just kind of laying the foundation and, peeling back the onion and figuring out what was going on. And I'm somebody who was really looking towards kind of like programming and looking and what are we doing, guys, and what are we doing? And, that's my personality. But, it's taken us this much time to kind of get here where we're making these, fiscally responsibly smarter programming decisions. So I really applaud the superintendent for coming up with this. I am a parent of an 8th grader, 5th grader, and a 4th grader. My 8th grader is one of the classes with the largest. She was in the 201, the class with 8 sections. And so the average class size was around 23. We did not have additional supports as the superintendent is proposing to put in these I don't know who they're going to be or what they're going to be, Pam, but at the time, we didn't have that for my child. And as I say, it's a testament to our teachers because she's doing well. I know other committee members have 8th graders on this board. And again, they're a class size of 201, and their average classroom size was around 23. I also appreciate that the district was able to, Pam was able to speak with the parents and the teachers on Monday. I realize a little short notice, but from last year's budget meetings where we had the kindergarten issues, I feel like as a board, things weren't communicated as clearly, and I really appreciate the leadership and Pam taking the time to meet with parents and the district to kind of explain her plan, go over her protocols. I think that's really important as a committee member. I feel like communication and transparency is very important in this process, and I think that she did a nice job. So thank you for doing that. I think change is really uncomfortable. Nobody likes it. But as Glenn had said, as parents, we're always worried about our kids and how it's going to affect them, but our kids are super resilient. And one of the things I love about this town is, my son is friends with kids from all the different schools before we even got to the middle school, 5th grade, because of our sports, right? And all the activities that we do as a town. And so I just want to give my perspective of having a kid who's in that bubble grade experiencing this, because I hear you as parents, the concerns, but it's embarrassing for our town that we are educating our kids in hallways. When I was the PTA president of Hadley School a couple years ago, I sat in the audience and had a lot of issues with the facilities in our schools. And as a clinician and a healthcare provider, I was super concerned about a lot of those issues, and they have been addressed over the years, which I appreciate. So as a parent sitting there, we hear you, and we hear your concerns, but this is kind of embarrassing as a school committee member that our special education students and our general education students are being educated in the hallways, and it needs to stop. And we've all seen it and kind of known about it, and it's just, I'm really excited that we're finally taking a stance to change it. So, thank you.
I don't have much to add. I think you guys have said it very well. I do want to close on one thing. Part of why, and this relates directly to Mr. Delano and Ms. Marshall, part of our choice in hiring Ms. Angelakis as the superintendent is that she was an educator first. She has spent her whole career here with us. And really knows this town and knows our kids, and is not a politician. And I think the same could be said for all of us here on this committee, that while we ran for political office, we are not politicians and definitely not savvy in handling many of these things. So I want to apologize for what feels like not great communication, like not providing transparency. We struggle consistently to make sure that everybody knows what we're doing, and sometimes it feels like we're just screaming into the wind. But one of the things that we recognize that's really important in this district, and where we have suffered in the past, and why there was changes like this, was because of a lack of longevity. And we feel strongly about Ms. Angelakis. We feel strongly about what she's doing. We defer to her. A lot of these decisions that we hear are, we're not sitting around saying, oh, that's a fabulous idea. We really put the screws to her to understand what the rationale is and why. But I think it's important to remember that with Ms. Angelakis and with this really amazing leadership team that she has assembled, that we really do feel like we're on the right path, and that finally this revolving door has ended. To that extent, many of you may not have paid attention to it, but we did renew her contract earlier this year. We think that that is going to contribute greatly to continuing to stabilize the district, continuing to help with our long-term planning. And again, as an educator first and not a politician, I feel proud to have you making these decisions. Thank you. So with that, I'm going to close our, I need my cheat sheet here. I'm going to close our public hearing on the school budget. If I could get a motion for that. And a second?
Second.
All in favor? We still do have things on our agenda. If you don't want to stick around, we won't be offended, but we'll just ask you to move on into the hallway sooner than later. So my chair report is very short this week. While we did have a tri-chair meeting to catch you up on, I think it has been brought up, and it mostly had to do with our budget. But the one new thing that I do have is that, as I have mentioned to you separately, I have started to create the bones for a Facebook page. I have spoken with our attorney, who said that he is okay with it, so long as the information that we provide is one-directional, that it is not a place for us to have comments, to hold discussions, but merely a message board. So I know that there are some hesitations from some members, but if it's okay with you, unless I hear strong objections, I'm going to launch it and give whoever is on Facebook permissions to also use it, and just say that we're going to be limiting our to one-way posts.
Do you want, do you want to be the head administrator so that we're checking with you before we post things, or do you want us to be just independently? I mean, it seems like it should maybe funnel through one person.
I think, at least to start with, I would prefer that it come through me, but I think once we all kind of get the hang of it, then I'm okay with it.
My suggestion would be to, at every opportunity, funnel things that we're announcing on Facebook or anything back to the website, because I think we really need, until we have an app or something like that, we really need people to be checking the
100%.
website.
So it will not contain, it will not hold any content. It will be links to other places. It will be links to videos of these meetings. It will be links to the budget. It will be links, so sending people to where they can learn to fish for information.
Our agendas and meeting minutes.
I'm not
They'll
even,
be-
I'm
they'll
not,
be
I'm not sure
directed to
about
the
those.
website, because they're all posted
Yeah.
on the website.
Can I ask, does this fall under communications at all, or no? Because I really don't know, like.
You know what, the answer is
I would think so.
yes, but I know that it's really, I know it's not what everybody does and feels comfortable with, but I want to respond to the fact that I do know a lot of people get their information on Facebook.
No, I totally agree with that. I just was wondering if, I think we have our communications for emails that we receive on our email serve, right, for us to answer back, but I'm just wondering if this falls under that, or should it, or if this is more just a way for you to, as chair, to kind of put stuff out there, which I'm fine with either.
So
I'm just
currently, what
asking.
it says is, if you need to contact anybody, it has a link to that email account, so that it will not be communication through Facebook, but it will be people through our shared email.
So it will be funneled to the communications subcommittee.
So that we're not using Facebook in any way to communicate, except to push information out.
And can the Facebook link be posted on the school district website under school committee?
We can do that.
Because I think that, just to bring Suzanne's point back, is we really want people going as much as we can to the website.
Yeah, I'd rather, once they're on the website, not to go to Facebook. I'd rather than be moving around Facebook.
Okay.
I mean, moving around the website.
Yep.
Any thoughts?
Is there a Twitter page too? Or Twitter?
Many.
Okay. I know there's a.
But not the school, but the school committee doesn't have
We
one.
don't have a Swampscott, a school committee Twitter account, but the superintendent
Yeah, that's a
does.
famous- Yeah, I know.
Is that famous?
Well, that's for school.
Or
Snow
infamous?
days.
Oh.
Snow days. It's very,
Yes, it's most active when it
yeah.
snows.
Okay. That's all I have. So from there, I will move into our consent agenda. The consent agenda, I have to tell you, I appreciate that you're still sitting here, all of you. Thank you. The consent agenda is designed to expedite the handling of routine and miscellaneous business of the district. The school committee may adopt the entire consent agenda with one motion. At the request of any committee member, any item may be removed from the consent agenda and placed on the regular agenda for discussion. On tonight's consent agenda, we have our session minutes from January 10th. We have our subcommittee meeting minutes from January 8th, the budget subcommittee. We have a donation from the Wright family to benefit the cable club. We have two donations from the Weatherspoon Foundation to benefit the Cable Club. And last but not least, 2 warrants, numbers 1828 and 1829, that is circulating for signatures. So I'll take a motion. Second?
A second.
Is there any discussion? I know I would like to say. Okay, give me 1 second, okay? I want to say first to the Wright family that I think that this was a really great gift. And I'm happy to see those students rewarded in a small way with your gift. So thank you.
They should have team uniforms.
Yeah, thank you. And Oliver, it sounds like I might have stolen your thunder.
No, yeah,
Okay,
well, I just wanted to say, like, I just, like, took my TV class with Mr. DeWitt and, like, went to the film screening. It was just, like, a really amazing community and sort of the small little thing in the Swampscott High School. And it's such a great, I don't know, I'm just, like, really happy that they're getting recognized and, like, that's sort of happening. I just wanted to say that.
I think this is a tiny bit off topic, but something really special happened this week for me. Completely random, but it just hit home like how important people like Mr. Doulat are, or a lot of the auxiliary staff in the building, because a couple years ago, my daughter got inducted into the National Honor Society, and she asked Mrs. Lavender, a gym teacher, to be her sponsor, which blew everyone's mind because the gym teacher doesn't usually sponsor Honor Society people, right? So it just shows how important that woman was to my daughter. And then on Monday, I missed a phone call from my kid who called me at 5 a.m. and then left a message saying, the boat leaves in 30 minutes, so I guess I talked to you in a month. And I was so sad that I missed her phone call. But then I came to school on Monday afternoon for that teacher's meeting, and Mr. Polacco, the hall security person, the door monitor, right? He ran up to me and he said, Ellie texted me this morning. She's on this great adventure, and she texted me pictures, and she just wanted to talk to me before I left. And I was just like, oh my God, I miss my daughter, but she got Mr. Polacco, you know? And I was like, and I know, but I just, like, it's like so important, like, you know, Oliver's saying, like, you meet your peeps, or you have these relationships with these adults that you are not expecting. Like, you know, you think the teachers influence everyone, but it's, I mean, and Mr. Doulet is obviously a teacher, but I'm just saying, like, it's a lot of the auxiliary support staff that really impact kids and make a difference, and I just think that's really great. It's great about, you know, this school. It's probably great about every school. But anyway, that's the import of supporting extracurriculars.
Thank you.
Thank you, Suzanne.
So if there are no questions, I'll entertain a motion to vote.
I'll make a motion to accept the consent agenda. I thought we already did that.
I think so. Sorry.
Oh, you already did that?
I'm tired.
Just vote.
So,
Oh, yeah,
all in
just-
favor?
sorry,
All in favor?
It is late.
Okay, it's unanimous. And now, I'm actually going to remember to do this. I will entertain a motion to adjourn the meeting.
I'll make that motion.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Adjourned.